Chapter 423. As an expert of Shun Xian, the sixth elder had been fully prepared for Jun Moxie's subsequent attack. He had even prepared for it. Not only him, but everyone else had the same thought. Because attacking the sixth elder was the best choice that Jun Moxie could make at this moment. At the very least, he could escape unscathed. The eighth elder and the ninth elder stood far away and looked at the scene. Their hands were on the hilt of their swords, and they were also ready to step forward at any time. After witnessing Jun Moxie's unfathomable and extraordinary footwork, everyone present was deeply wary of him. Even the experts of Shun Xian were no exception. Even the solitary eagle, who was also famous for his footwork, might not be able to win against Jun Moxie's footwork. The Sky Xian expert, who was supposed to be quite insignificant in the eyes of the Spirit Xian experts, had become more and more important to them at this moment. And he had become an expert who was on the same level as them. They had to be on guard. Moreover, they had to be extremely careful and vigilant. However, at this moment, everyone's eyes clearly saw that Jun Moxie's body was sticking closely to Xiao Fengwu's back. Moreover, the sword in his hand was still flashing with a frightening cold light. The other Jun Moxie had suddenly appeared behind the eighth elder and the ninth elder. The corner of his mouth hung a dull but cruel smile, and a cold light flashed. Divine sword, blood of yellow flame. A quiet and bright sword light had suddenly and unexpectedly streaked across the legs of the eighth elder and the ninth elder. It was like a lightning bolt that shook the heaven and earth and disappeared in a flash. The brilliance of this sword light made everyone present feel as if they were facing an irresistible strong light, and they couldn't help but close their eyes. But it left a brilliant radiance in the entire world. The lightning had long since disappeared, but in the hearts of those who had closed their eyes because of its brilliance, the peerless sharpness of this lightning sword light lingered for a long time. Then Jun Moxie stood up like a crane soaring through the nine heavens, a dragon soaring into the sky, disappearing in a flash. No one knew where he had gone to. The eighth elder and the ninth elder felt a chill in their hearts. They had a vague feeling that something bad had happened. On the other side, the young lady in white also raised her head in puzzlement. She pondered for a moment, because even with her cultivation, she couldn't detect where Jun Moxie went after releasing the sword light. It was as if he had suddenly disappeared from the world. There was no trace at all, not even his spiritual consciousness. What was going on? He once again used this extremely profound movement technique, but I still couldn't grasp any information from it. This was no longer like a Xian skill of the human world. It was simply an immortal skill or a divine skill. The sixth elder was holding Xiao Fengwu with one hand when he suddenly froze. A long while passed before he tremblingly called out, "Eighth elder, ninth elder, are you all right?" He had clearly seen that Jun Moxie's sword light had bypassed their lower bodies. So, why hadn't they reacted to it? What's going on? The sixth elder didn't believe that Jun Moxie had suddenly made such a scene to put on a show. He must have had his reasons. But why do the eighth and ninth elders look fine? Nothing seems to have happened to them. The eighth elder and the ninth elder blankly looked at each other. Both of them had reached Shun Xian's level, but their cultivation was a level lower than the sixth elder's. Therefore, the sixth elder had recovered a lot and could barely fight back. But the two of them were still in a weak state. They checked each other's bodies and confirmed that there was nothing wrong with them. Then they laughed and said, "Of course we're all right. That little bastard Jun Moxie is just a mere Tian Xian Jr. What could possibly happen to him with his petty tricks and bluff?" But the two of them hadn't finished their sentence when their faces suddenly changed. A section of fluttering white robe fell from their thighs and revealed a pair of long legs. They stood upright in the wind. The cold wind blew, and they felt a bone-piercing chill. The lower half of the robe and the upper half of the robe were obviously one. So why did it fall? Could it be that it was cut off by someone? Just as they were thinking about this, they suddenly felt a heart-wrenching pain in their legs. The two of them looked at each other in horror and moved their bodies at the same time. They didn't dare to take a step forward in disbelief. Their bodies had only moved a little when they suddenly fell down like a golden mountain or a jade pillar. Half of their bodies fell down. Fresh blood spurted out like 4 pillars of blood. Their tragic screams tore through the night sky, and their voices could be heard from miles away. Where the two of them were originally standing, for smooth legs from the calves to the thighs, stood perfectly straight, like a towering mountain, towering and unmoving. Only the upper part of the legs was gurgling with blood foam. Jun Imosie's sword light flashed, and he had actually chopped off 2 people's legs. Because his speed had reached an indescribable level, and the blood of yellow flame sharpness had reached an unprecedented level, the two of them actually didn't notice that their legs had been cut off for such a long time. Perhaps they had noticed it, but the two of them didn't dare to believe it. The surroundings fell into a deathly silence once again. No one could have imagined that there was actually someone in this world who was fast to such an extent. There was actually such a sword, and it was sharp to such an extent. The white-robed girl at the side sighed lightly. Her voice was so soft that no one could hear it. She was the only one who had seen Jun Moxie's sword clearly. There wasn't much ingenuity in that sword, and it didn't even have any technique to speak of. The only requirement was to be fast, a little faster, until the speed reached the limit. The movement technique and the speed of the sword worked closely together, once again raising the speed to the peak of perfection. Then he slashed out with that sword. Of all the techniques in the world, there was nothing it couldn't overcome, but speed was unbreakable. When speed reached the limit, everything else would be destroyed. Jun Moxie, this newbie Xian practitioner who had just entered the Tian Xian realm not even 2 days ago, actually managed to heavily injure and cripple 2 Shan Xian experts in front of everyone's eyes. Although these 2 Shan Xian experts had already exhausted all their strength because of the sudden change, whether it was their Xian Qi or their mental strength, they had all suffered from extreme pressure. Out of their full strength, they were only left with 15% at most, but they were still Shun Xian experts. Jun Moxie was actually able to injure them so severely that they didn't even know they were injured. Those 2 legs had clearly been cut off, but they were still able to temporarily join together with the body, and not even a single drop of blood had spilled out. Regardless of the speed of his movement technique, sword technique, or the sharpness of his sword, they had all reached a terrifying level. 8th brother, 9th brother, the 6th elder roared. Suddenly, blood spilled out of his eyes due to extreme grief and indignation. He roared, and Xiao Feng Wu fell to the ground. The 6th elder stood there in a daze, and his whole body trembled. The Silver City had dispatched an unprecedentedly powerful lineup for this expedition. Xiao Buyu was the strongest person under the great master level, and had personally led the troops. 4 of the Xiao family's elders had been dispatched, and 2 of the Han family's elders had also been dispatched. So, a total of 6 Shan Xian experts had been dispatched at the same time. Moreover, the 7 swords of the Silver City could rival the 7 great swords of the great masters if they joined hands. Moreover, the 2 Tian Xian experts, Xiao Han and Mu Shui Tong, such a force would have caused a sensation wherever they went. Who wouldn't dare to look them in the eye? However, such a formidable force had inexplicably suffered repeated blows. In fact, they had even suffered a devastating blow before they could retreat. The Xiao family's entire army had been annihilated, and the cause of this was Xiao Han's challenge to Jun Wui. It was a trivial matter. Everyone had thought that the solitary eagle of the Jun family couldn't be underestimated. But they had 6 Shan Xian experts and the 7 swords. So they were much stronger than solitary eagle. Even if Jun Wui had spared no expense to employ the tactic of numbers, they would have still been able to escape if they wanted to. How could a group of ordinary soldiers match Shun Xian's speed? However, they hadn't expected that Xiao Han and his nephew would be crippled after this battle. Xiao Buyu would explode out of shame and indignation. Moreover, Jun Moxie had exposed the Xiao family's most despicable and shameless side. They had lost all standing and reputation. Only the 6th elder was left. It could be said that he was besieged on all sides. The June family wasn't the only one who wanted to deal with him. Even his own companions wanted to deal with him. I hate this. Why did a mysterious and powerful person appear at this critical juncture? And why did he imprison all 5 of us? How could the June family be a match for the 5 elders of Shun Xian and Xiaobuyu if that wasn't the case? The 6th elder looked around in grief and indignation. He saw countless pairs of eyes glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey. Then he sighed and suddenly thrust his sword into Xiao Fengwu's throat. I would rather lose my life than accept this endless humiliation. There's no hope for us today, so I'll only face a greater tragedy if I try to hold on. I won't have the opportunity to escape. My 2 brothers' legs have been broken, so they can't be any more crippled. The only thing I can do is to give them a quick death. Then I'll commit suicide, and everyone else will die together. Ancestor, this child is incompetent. The 6th elder looked up to the sky and cried bitterly. His eyes were streaming with tears as he condensed a sword light from his sword. Then he hacked at the 8th and 9th elders on the ground. However, he was in a trance, so he didn't even notice that June Moxie had appeared behind him. The 6th elder's chest flashed with a puff sound. Then the tip of the sword disappeared, and an arrow of blood sprayed out. That sword had destroyed the 6th elder's bodily functions in an instant. The 6th elder's eyes bulged out as he tried to stand up. But the sword light hadn't even reached halfway when it scattered. Then it fell to the ground with a clang sound. His body swayed twice, and the light in his eyes dimmed and scattered. Then he fell to the ground and twitched twice. Clang! The divine sword returned to its scabbard and issued a clear sound of satisfaction. It seemed as if it had eaten its fill in this first battle. The blood of 4 Shinxians and 1 Tianxians. The blood of 5 despicable villains was the first sacrifice for the divine sword, blood of yellow flame. Such a result was astounding. It was hard to believe. In fact, it was hard to believe even though they had witnessed it with their own eyes. June Moxie stood calmly. He looked at the 2 elders and the 7 swordsmen from the Silver Blizzard City. His face was expressionless as he slowly said, "Today's matter was a personal grudge between the Xiao and June families. But the grudge has been settled. Does anyone have anything else to say?" Chapter 4:24. Today is the Mid-Autumn Festival. Everyone happy holidays. Today's first chapter has been delivered. Second, I'm working even harder. Today, I went home and had a big drink with my dad. I drank 3 bottles of beer and a can of Sprite. I'm feeling a little dizzy. I'll say again that today's 2nd chapter will be completed. But tomorrow's 4th chapter may or may not be completed in the wee hours of the morning. So don't wait. If it's not completed in the wee hours of the morning, then it will be completed in the afternoon. I'm not asking for leave. I'm just informing you. Thank you, ladies. I'll kiss you one by one. I'll leave you to cool off. Well, you won't like it if I kiss you. June Moxie stood there calmly. He looked at the 2 elders and the 7 swordsmen of the Silver Blizzard City. His face was expressionless as he slowly said, "Today's matter is a personal grudge between the Xiao and the June family. But the grudge has been settled. Does anyone have anything else to say?" "What else can we say? You've killed and crippled people. You've gone to extremes. And now you're asking us what we have to say? You're vicious and merciless. You have that mysterious expert behind you. What else can we say? Moreover, we have nothing to say. This has become a personal grudge between the Xiao and the June family. Moreover, the Xiao family has become the common enemy of both the Silver Blizzard City and the June family. How could this matter be resolved? It's simply unimaginable." The 10 people looked at each other in dismay. None of them opened their mouths to speak. "Well, we've settled our personal grudges. But we've also lost face for the Silver Blizzard City. I'm deeply sorry for this." June Moxie sighed and said with a heavy expression, "You've lost face for the Silver Blizzard City now? Why did you come earlier? You didn't think that the Silver Blizzard City's face would be affected when you asked the Great Elder to strip dance, right? Xiaobuyu is a traitor to the Silver Blizzard City. But who doesn't know that the Xiao family belongs to the Silver Blizzard City?" Then June Moxie changed the topic. However, I want everyone to be clear about one thing. The reason why I apologize to the Silver Blizzard City is because of my aunt. It's not because of the Silver Blizzard City. After all, the Shao family's biggest plot against the Silver Blizzard City has been uncovered. This young master feels that this is a good thing for your Silver City, or at least for your Han family. It was a good thing, but it seemed that the Grand Silver Blizzard City couldn't even compare to the eldest Mississippi Forget It. The situation was better than the person. Now that things have come to this, I'm not trying to show off. Haha. Everyone can see that if I hadn't used my remarkable methods today, I wouldn't have been able to find out that the Shao family had such evil intentions in the Silver City. Haha. I'm afraid that the Silver City's future will be bleak if this continues. However, I'm a kind-hearted person. I won't take things too far. Jun Moxie's voice changed again. He heaved a long sigh and said, as the saying goes, who wouldn't be stabbed in the martial world? It wasn't easy for everyone. As the ancient said, let go when you have to, and forgive when you can. Saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. Lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha immediately. But you've pushed me too far. So, there's no need to endure anymore. Good. The 7 swords of the Silver City weren't the only ones whose eyebrows twitched as soon as these words were spoken. Even the solitary eagle and the soldiers who were watching the battle were left dumbstruck. It was hard to imagine that there could be such a thick-skinned person in this world. You still have a nerve to say that you're a kind-hearted person? You won't take things too far? Forgive when you can? Why didn't you cut off your tongue when you said these words in such a strong wind? That's not all, but you didn't even bat an eyelid when you said these words. Your heartbeat didn't even accelerate. This level of shamelessness is really amazing. How can we not be convinced? The hatred between the Shao family and my Jun family is higher than the sky and deeper than the sea. But I'm a kind-hearted person who doesn't wish to be stained with blood, even though there's such a huge hatred between us. I mean, didn't I spare the culprit Shao Han's life? Everyone has seen this with their own eyes. So, you should know that I'm not lying. You're not lying. But it's better to kill him than to do this good deed. Those murderous villains are like pure virgins when compared to a good person like you. The 7 swords felt their teeth turn sour and their stomachs twitch. You see, I wouldn't have killed the 6th elder if I hadn't saved the 8th and 9th elders' lives. And the 2nd master, Shao Buyu, had committed suicide. So, I had invited him to dance for entertainment and for everyone to have some fun. Moreover, he had also exercised his body. It was the best of both worlds. You see, he's already so old. So, how could he not be magnanimous? Ah, that's right. Shao Fengwu was also killed by the 6th elder. I had kindly delivered him to the 6th elder's hands because I thought that they were family. But I hadn't expected that the 6th elder would find his own grandson displeasing to the eye. So, he killed him as soon as he was delivered. That was a very quick and decisive move. I didn't have the time to rescue him. So, I'm very ashamed. Everyone knows that I'm a good person, but I'm too soft-hearted. I bear all my problems by myself. I'm afraid of hurting the lives of ants when I sweep the floor, and I cherish the lives of moths. But you must know that life is made of flesh and blood. It's not easy to grow up. Blurg, solitary eagle, turned around and vomited. The surrounding soldiers followed suit and vomited all over the ground. This is too shameless, too disgusting, too outrageous. Such a shameless person is rarely seen in the world. Now, I'm begging you to take the 3 of them back to the Silver City. That shouldn't be a problem, right? In any case, you guys are going the same way. Who knows, you might be able to find out more. Jun Mo Xie turned a blind eye to everyone's vomiting. His face was full of smiles, and he said in an unusually friendly manner, "This is human life, ah?" The Silver City's 7 swords and the 3rd elder's 5th elder quickly left with Shao Han and the other 2 crippled men after Jun Moxie had finished speaking. It was a great blessing to be able to leave this little demon's side as soon as possible. This is too disgusting. Mu Shuetong cupped his hands in obeisance towards Jun Wui before he left. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. It was worth mentioning that the little princess, Han Yinming, couldn't wait to run away. She had looked at June Moxie as if she was looking at a demon before she left. She was afraid that this demon would devour her skin and bones if she stayed any longer. Emocia. Jun Wui's eyes turned red as he grabbed June Moxie's hand. He looked emotional. What you're saying, is it true? What is true? June Moxie was somewhat puzzled. It's about those kids from the Hall of Hell. Are you really their descendants? Are you the descendants of my brothers? Jun Wui's eyes flickered with tears as he spoke in a hoarse voice. The first thing this blood general thought of when he got his revenge was his brother's descendant. He was hoping that Jun Moxie would tell him that the answer was no. Jun Wui didn't know how he would face such a cruel matter if it was true. I'm not lying. Most of it should be true. Jun Moxie understood. His expression became heavy as he said, "Third uncle, please be at ease. I reinvestigated and resettled them after I found out about this. Currently, their lives are much better. Moreover, I have already arranged for people to help them recover. Some of them have already recovered. Apart from that, I have also asked my master to concoct some miraculous medicine that can help them recover." Jun Moxie had no choice but to raise the flag in order to reassure Jun Wui. Jun Wui had always been a sentimental person. If this matter couldn't be handled properly, then he would feel sad when he saw these orphans again, even if he reunited with Han Yinyao in the future. In fact, this matter might even become a huge gap between Jun Wui and Han Yinyao. Both of them would be deeply in love with each other, but they would regret it for the rest of their lives. Such a matter wasn't impossible with Jun Wui's character. In fact, it was highly possible. The situation had gradually become clear. It would be a pity if this matter led to the birth of another tragedy. Therefore, Jun Moxie had gritted his teeth and made such an illusory promise. He had pushed everything to his master. Even if this matter didn't work out in the end, it would still give Jun Wui hope, just like the illusory hope he had before his legs had recovered. Besides, this matter wasn't necessarily impossible with the upgrade of Jun Moxie's Hongjun Pagoda. That's good. That's good. With that senior's help, I believe there won't be any problems. Jun Wui was somewhat excited. He raised his eyebrows and said heavily, "If I can't take good care of them, how can I face my old brothers in the future?" Jun Moxie's heart sank again. Ever since he had heard that those children were related to the hatred between the Jun and Xiao family, Jun Wui's mood had been somewhat strange. This was definitely not a good sign. "Third uncle, those little fellows and I are still counting on you," Jun Moxie reminded. Jun Wui's tiger eyes were filled with tears. He looked at him with an unusually complicated expression. Suddenly, he smiled heavily and patted his shoulder. But he didn't say anything and just walked away by himself. His back view was unusually lonely and unusually bleak. This matter was bound to be a knot in Jun Wui's heart. Jun Moxie sighed. The bugle horn sounded, and the soldiers quickly returned to their positions. With another order, Jun Wui once again passed down a gag order. Solitary Eagle looked at Jun Moxie and suddenly approached him slowly. He said, "Emocia, what you've done this time is a little rash. Although your strength is high, you've exposed it a little too early." During this period of time, Solitary Eagle had already gotten used to thinking from the Jun family's point of view. Too early? Jun Moxie looked at him with interest. At this time, when the matter between you and Guanqing Han is causing a huge uproar, you've made such an earth-shattering move. Isn't that even more suspicious? Although you already have the strength of Tian Xian and your combat power has reached Shan Xian's level, you've still not truly reached the realm of a peerless expert. It's not enough to intimidate everyone. Solitary Eagle frowned and looked at him. Do you care? Jun Moxie tilted his head and the corners of his mouth curled into a habitual evil smile. The reason why I'm doing this is to ask those rotten scholars and let them think about it. Think about which family among them is more worthy of my killing than the Xiao family of Blizzard Silver City. Jun Moxie's eyes were overflowing with killing intent. He said in a heavy tone, "Since I've dared to do this, I'll dare to do it again. Worldly imperial power, morality, and Confucianism are all farts in my eyes." Chapter 425. Today's second update has arrived. I'm dizzy. I've only written 1,000 more words. I'm going to sleep. Tomorrow will be the fourth watch in the afternoon. The Silver Blizzard City's people had all left, and this matter had come to an end. Jun Wu-yi had originally been in a good mood after beating his enemy. But then, he unexpectedly found out about a hidden secret that was difficult to accept, and his originally lively heart seemed to have been shrouded in a layer of lingering haze. However, the third master was still the commander of the army. He adjusted his mood and returned to the army to take command. After all, the army had been thrown into disorder because of the battle. So, the army had to be readjusted as soon as possible. Solitary Eagle and Da Xiao didn't immediately return to the army. Solitary Eagle had challenged the 7 swords of the Silver City by himself, and he had borrowed the strength of the 7 swords to perfect his soaring eagle technique. That battle had been very beneficial to Solitary Eagle since he had been crazily obsessed with martial arts. He had suffered a small loss when he had faced the combined attack of the 7 swords and Xiao Buyu, but the overall benefits still outweighed the disadvantages. Solitary Eagle had always done things his own way, so he simply sat down to meditate since everything was over. He adjusted his breathing and digested what he had gained from the battle. Da Xiao was the same. Da Xiao had only been in this world for about half a year. He had fought many times before, but they couldn't be considered as real battles. Only the battle with Xiao Buyu could be considered as a real life or death battle. That battle had seemed simple, but it had great significance for Jun Moxie. The Xian techniques of his previous life had almost merged into one in that battle. Solitary Eagle sat down to digest what he had gained, and the army also needed some time to readjust. Da Xiao also sat down to accompany them for a while. Not much time had passed since a messenger had informed them that it was getting late, so they had to set up camp. Da Xiao and Solitary Eagle's readjustment had also come to an end. Please wait a moment. You're leaving? What are we going to do? Jun Moxie and Solitary Eagle had just gotten up and were about to return when they heard a delicate and timid voice. The two of them turned around in astonishment. Only then did they remember that there were 2 other women in the tea house where the Silver City was located. When they first arrived, they seemed to be in some sort of dispute with the Xiao family. Hearing the voice, the young master, Senior Eagle, and Senior Eagle were both taken aback. A green-clothed young girl was standing not far away from the 2 of them. Her small hands were twisting the hem of her clothes with all her might. Her tan little face was not beautiful at all. Only her pair of big bright eyes were rather moving. But other than that, she was just like a mountain girl from the countryside. Moreover, she was the kind of little girl that was somewhat ugly. Jun Moxie felt that he had never seen this woman before, but for some reason, he felt a sense of familiarity in his heart. As an outstanding assassin and the king of assassins, Jun Moxie would never let go of any doubts. He immediately thought about it. Finally, with a flash of inspiration, the green-clothed figure of the Qian Sun Serpent Queen flashed past his heart. For some reason, the figure of the Snake King actually faintly overlapped with the young girl in front of him. But wasn't this too unimaginable? At the same time, Solitary Eagle also thought of the Snake King. The 2 of them could not help but look at each other. They could both see the meaning in each other's eyes. Impossible. He had seen the Snake King in the Tian Fa forest the last time. She was also dressed in green, and her figure was slim. However, her face was extremely beautiful. Moreover, the Snake King's every movement was filled with the aura of an impeccable powerhouse. Even a casual glance from her contained the aura of a king who looked down on all living things. In fact, that was the demeanor of a supreme powerhouse in the eyes of humans. But how could this mountain girl in front of them compare? Who are you people? Why are you here? Jun Moxie looked at her suspiciously. He had already rejected the idea that the person in front of him was the Qian Sun Serpent Queen. But he still couldn't let go of the fact that these 2 girls had appeared alone in this place. My elder sister and I are from Tianxiang. We had come with our family's guards to purchase medicinal ingredients. But we didn't expect that we would encounter many wild beasts a few days ago. And the guards and us were separated. The green-clothed girl said in a delicate and pitiful manner, My elder sister and I finally escaped with our lives after much difficulty. But we encountered those hateful people. They wanted to take us back to be their wives. We couldn't even come to an agreement with them. So they wanted to rob us openly. They were so vicious. The green-clothed girl's voice was as sorrowful as ever. But June Moxie could hear a trace of a strange tone in her voice. It seemed as if she was somewhat amused or disdainful. Just now, at the most critical moment, you guys came. Thanks to you guys coming, you even managed to chase away all the evildoers. You guys are the saviors of us sisters. The green-clothed girl's voice was full of emotion. She narrated the story of a lone girl who met a strong man on the road. Then, a young hero appeared to save the beauty. Yeah, you're saying that the Shao family's brat wanted to take you back to be his wife? June Moxie was somewhat stunned as he looked at the green-clothed girl's dark face. He coughed twice and said, the Shao family's, this eyesight is truly different from the masses. It's extraordinary. It's not me. It's my elder sister. My elder sister. The green-clothed girl was ashamed and angry at the same time. In fact, she almost used her Xian technique. She didn't want to hide her identity anymore. She wanted to kill this hateful guy. Even if she didn't kill him, she wanted to teach him a good lesson. Oh, no wonder. I was just saying that the descendants of the Shao family had never seen a beautiful woman. But they wouldn't be so hungry that they couldn't be choosy. What I meant to say was that you aren't that ugly. June Moxie smiled in relief. The Snake King's delicate body trembled in anger when she heard Da Xiao's words. This explanation is more infuriating than no explanation at all. This brat's reputation as the #1 debauchee of Tianxiang isn't undeserved. No wonder my elder sister doesn't like him. I had thought that this guy was a man of affection and righteousness, and I had a good impression of him. But I saw that he was judging a book by its cover. So I couldn't help but sweep away the previous admiration I had for him. In fact, I nearly crushed my teeth from gritting them. The Beast King of this generation had been angered to the point of tears. June Moxie secretly observed the situation, and he felt relieved in his heart. The Snake King would have either fought me or wouldn't have cared about my impudent debauchee. But she wouldn't have shed tears. This is the normal behavior of an ordinary girl. However, he didn't know that the Snake King was the Beast King of this generation. But she hadn't been able to take human form for more than 20 years. And she had started to behave like a human after she had taken human form. She might have possessed intelligence before, but there was still a big gap between her and an ordinary human being. The Snake King's temperament was no more than that of an 18 or 19-year-old girl. So, her endurance might not be comparable to that of a girl of the same age when she couldn't display her strength at will. This was the fundamental difference between a level 9 Xian beast and a Beast King. That was why some level 9 Xian beasts could only be beasts, and some level 9 Xian beasts could become Beast Kings. As long as it was a woman, which one of them didn't cherish their appearance? Although the Snake King knew that her current appearance was a disguise, she still felt extremely wronged in her heart. Most men would have the same thought. That is, they would be able to gain the favor and love of a rich family's daughter or even a princess. And it was the same for all women. Even if they didn't dress up well, they would always hope that a man would discover their inner beauty. They wouldn't fall in love with them because of their beautiful appearance. Rich men would always hope that women would get close to them and like them, but not for money. Beautiful women would always hope that men would get close to them, but not because of their beauty. They would always think that this was true love. Oh, I'm getting off topic. While everyone was talking, the girl in white who had been sitting up all this time finally stood up and slowly walked over. Even with Solitary Eagle's mental fortitude, he couldn't help but be dazzled by the girl's peerless elegance. It was like the bright moon in the sky had suddenly descended upon the world. Solitary Eagle stared blankly for a while before turning to look at June Moxie. He thought that this young man's experience was shallow. How could he have seen such a beautiful girl before? He might even make a fool of himself. At the very least, he would be dumbfounded. It wouldn't be surprising if he were to salivate. Even a descendant of the Silver Blizzard City's Shao family had thoughts of snatching the bride. One could only imagine how beautiful this girl was. If one had to compare, then Guan Qinghan was undoubtedly a national beauty. But this girl was a peerless beauty. Dugu Xiaoi was pure and adorable. But this girl was a peerless beauty. There was only one person in the world. There were no two colors in the sky. This white-clothed young lady was completely worthy of such words. This was completely out of Solitary Eagle's expectations. Because Jun Moxie's face was calm at this moment. It was as if he didn't see this rare beauty. In his eyes, it was as if he was looking at an ordinary person. He was completely indifferent. This was definitely not an act. Because if he deliberately put on an act, he would never reveal such a natural expression. This kid is really a freak. Seeing such a beautiful girl, even this old man's eyes almost popped out. But he didn't even bat an eyelid. Could it be that the previous event was too intense, and now he can't take it anymore? Solitary Eagle muttered to himself. Jun Moxie wasn't completely indifferent. It was just that although this girl came over to thank him, Jun Moxie didn't feel the slightest bit of thank you. Instead, he felt a bone-chilling cold. This girl in white was extremely beautiful. But, for some reason, there was an inexplicable hostility coming from her. Although she had tried her best to hide it, how could Jun Moxie, who had experienced ambushes from all sides for 2 lifetimes, not be able to sense it? This kind of feeling, it was as if he had severely offended her in the past. Could it be that my enemies from my previous life have also crossed over? That's impossible, right? Even if they crossed over, no one would know that I am Jun Moxie. Jun Dashao was somewhat puzzled. Mrs. Heavenly Beauty is really amazing. But what is your name? Why have you come here? Jun Moxie searched around and didn't find the slightest bit of Xian Qi fluctuation on these 2 sisters. So he skillfully asked this question. This question had already been answered by the girl in green. Now, Jun Moxie deliberately repeated it. He wanted to see if these 2 girls would make such a low-level mistake. This girl's surname is Mei Xuan. That is my younger sister, Mei Qianqian. This foolish sister thanks young Master Jun for your help. The girl in white blushed as she replied softly. I was just coincidentally able to settle some grudges with the Shao family of Blizzard Silver City. I didn't deliberately help you. Miss, you don't have to be so polite. A good name. Mei Xuan. Not bad, not bad. Plum blossoms in the snow like smoke. Only a peerless beauty like Miss is worthy of such a beautiful name. Your younger sister's name is also very good. Mei Qianqian. He no money? Jun Moxie opened his eyes and blurted out these words. No money? The Snake King's face turned black. He wished he could bite the debauchee Jun and let him know that not everyone could be played with. It doesn't matter whether young Master Jun had the intention or not. But the fact is that you have indeed saved us sisters. The girl in white said in a gentle voice. She didn't respond to Jun Moxie's no money. Miss is too polite. How does Miss know my surname? Da Xiao asked. That group of villains had revealed the young master's name. We sisters are also people of Tianxiang. So, we naturally know the young master's identity. The girl in white replied, as if nothing had happened. You are also people of Tianxiang. It turns out that you are from the same hometown. Miss Mei, we are really brought together by fate. Da Xiao stared blankly for a moment, but his tone became even more familiar. The girl in white curled her lips in a secretive manner. Brought together by fate? This old woman and you are truly brought together by fate. Fate will make you regret it for the rest of your life. Next, the girl in white, Mei Xuan, made a request. She wished to accompany the army back to Tianxiang City. Jun Moxie's eyes turned, and he agreed. He certainly didn't covet her. For Da Xiao, a woman's beauty would only last for a few years. Her figure was good, and her face was passable. After all, who would be interested in looking at her face when the lights went out at night? However, this girl in white's unique beauty could strike a blow at Guan Qinghan. So, it would be a good idea. If I can arouse Guan Qinghan's sense of crisis because of this, and make it possible for me to make it a second time, how wonderful would that be? It doesn't matter whether these two girls have ulterior motives or not. They don't even have the slightest bit of Xian. So what can they possibly do? He looked at Solitary Eagle. Solitary Eagle pondered for a moment. Then, he nodded in a certain manner. June Moxie felt reassured in his heart. It would be excusable if there were strong people in this world who couldn't see through my disguise. But wouldn't it be too outrageous if even a great master like Solitary Eagle couldn't see through my disguise? One would need to be ranked in the top 4 of the 8 great masters in order to hide from Solitary Eagle. Perhaps one would need to be ranked even higher. After all, not everyone has the terrifying strength of Venerable May. Besides, these two little girls don't even look 20 years old. So, if they turn out to be great masters, then I'll eat that old solitary falcon alive. I'll eat him alive if that's the case. Therefore, the two sisters, Mei Shuyan and Mei Qian, were comfortably invited into the carriage by June Moxie. Chapter 426. In the silence of the night, Dugu Xiao Yi Xiao made June Mo Xie, who wasn't far away, shiver. He draped a long robe over his shoulders and rushed over to investigate. He asked and found out that Dugu Xiaoyi's pet, Little White, had been missing ever since she had arrived in Tian Fa. But it had mysteriously returned in the middle of the night. It must be known that it had taken them more than 10 days to travel to the Tian Fa forest at this moment. Dugu Xiaoyi was naturally overjoyed by this unexpected turn of events. Guan and Dugu finally had the leisure to look at June Moxie after they had heard this. June Daxiao had come in wearing a long robe. His 2 fair thighs were very eye-catching, and it caused the 2 women to cry out in surprise. Their cries contained 30% surprise, 40% jealousy, and 30% unsure of what to say. Daxiao's body could be said to be perfect after he had transformed from the Hongjun Pagoda. His body's toughness and proportions had reached the level of Mr. So-and-so. He wouldn't even need to reveal his face if he were to be placed on Earth. His body would be enough to charm thousands of women. However, there was always one place that was too perfect, or perhaps it could be said that the only place that the young master was dissatisfied with was that his skin was too white. Although it wasn't the kind of sickly white, but a very healthy color, it was still to the point where his skin was sparkling and translucent like snow. This point alone was enough to make Guan Qinghan and Dugu Xiao Yi and the other beauties to feel jealousy. Little girl Dugu was relatively insensitive. She had asked the young master at least 10 times over the past few days what he had used to achieve such smooth, tender, and white skin. This had made the young master extremely gloomy. A grown man like him has skin that makes even beautiful women sigh in admiration. I don't know if I should be happy or depressed. Daxiao had been accustomed to level 1 sleep when he had heard the little girl's cries. So, he had hurriedly rushed in after putting on his robe. The upper half of his body was fine. However, the lower half of his body wasn't in a state of decoration. The 2 women had been anxious to answer Daxiao's questions. So, how could they not cry out in surprise now that they had calmed down? There were 4 women in this room. So, why were there only 2 cries? That was because only Miss Guan and the little girl had cried out in surprise. The other 2 girls, Mei Shuyan and Mei Qian, didn't even bat an eyelid in the slightest. However, Little White was much more well-behaved than before. It used to pounce on June Daxiao as soon as it saw him. But it didn't dare to carelessly go up to him anymore. Instead, it practiced diligently. It would practice its claws in front of the 4 women when it had nothing to do. In fact, it seemed as if it was putting on show, but it didn't know who it was putting on a show for. Dugu Xiaoyi was a mischievous little girl. So, she started to shout, "This little guy has finally become sensible. It's time for me to find a wife." The little girl had finished teasing her Xian beast, but she hadn't had the time to let out a sigh. It was obvious that her unintentional words had touched her heart. Then, Guan Qinghan also sighed. It was unknown whether this had triggered a chain reaction. The green-clothed girl, Qian Sun's Serpent Queen, also sighed. Only the white-clothed girl, Mei Shuyan, didn't sigh, but she faintly coughed. They continued their journey the next day. However, their journey had sped up a lot. June Moxie had been suspicious about Little White's return this time, but he had thought that the Xian Beast Kings of Tian Fa had specially sent Little White back. This kind of thing was too ridiculous. So he had dismissed it with a smile. Perhaps Little White and Dugu Xiaoi have some kind of telepathy. Moreover, this kind of Xian Beast tracking ability is frighteningly strong. So it's not surprising at all. June Moxie would go over to provoke Mei Shuyan on the way. He wanted to use this opportunity to provoke Guan Xinghan. You're ignoring me, aren't you? Look, I'm not any worse than you, right? So hurry up and come. I'll be waiting for you in my bed. We'll cross the Phoenix and become a dragon. The spring breeze will come again at the Jade Gate. We'll have sex on Mount Wu. Anyway, hurry up. However, Mei Shuyan's reaction had made June Moxie understand the meaning of there's always someone better than you. There's always a mountain higher than you. Miss Guan is cold enough, but she doesn't know that there's always an iceberg above the iceberg. Mei Shuyan is cold and indifferent. She frowns after a few sentences. Then, she becomes impatient and orders him to leave. She's even colder than Guan Qinghan. Miss Guan would at most ignore you with a cold face. But Mei Shuyan would drive him away. Her attitude was as strict as the law. She would obey every order. She was more like an empress than an empress. Da Xiao's plan had been ruined by Mei Shuyan, but it hadn't been completely fruitless. One day, Guan Qinghan finally relented. She secretly told June Moxie that she wanted him to wait in the tent at night. She had something to say. June Moxie suddenly felt a burst of heat in his lower abdomen. Hard work pays off. Isn't this the case? It seems that this girl has some sense of crisis. She knows how to consolidate her position. June Daxiao found a place in the afternoon. He washed himself until he smelled good. Then he put on a snow-white robe. It was soft and soft. It could reflect the elegance of a young man. In other words, it was the best way to show off. The curtain of night had quietly fallen. A cold cough was heard outside the tent. Well, the iceberg is here. June Moxie smiled complacently in his heart. He was very reserved. He used a very manly and elegant voice. He said in an unusually calm and steady manner, "Please come in." The curtains were lifted, and June Moxie's smiling face turned into a bitter melon. The person who had come in was Guan Qinghan. But the problem was that there was another person behind Guan Qinghan. It was Dugu Xiaoi. Dugu Xiaoi was also holding Little White in her arms. June Moxie suddenly felt like a deflated ball. At this time, even if he used his toes to think, he would definitely know that Guan Qinghan's arrival wasn't what he had expected. This made June Daxiao, who was burning with passion and lust, very disappointed. It was like a big basin of snow water had been poured into his leather collar on a cold day. He felt cold from the top of his head to the back of his heel. This time, we came to you for a serious matter. I had a discussion with Sister Xiao Yi. After getting along with you these days, we felt that the two girls you saved were not simple. Moreover, almost none of what they said was true. But why did they insist on joining our team? I'm afraid they have ulterior motives. How could you be so careless this time? Guan Qinghan's cold eyes stared at him. She said, "Don't you know that it's a troubled time to take in two girls of unknown origin?" Why do you say that? June Moxie secretly rolled his eyes. Of course, I also know that these two girls have some unknown origin. But it's not as serious as you say, right? Don't look at that Mei Shuyan's arrogance. Maybe she's just trying to be diligent and play hard to get brother's attention. Maybe she's trying to get brother's attention. Emocia, I know that you've had a smooth journey recently. You've even defeated many experts from the Xiao family. You've been in the limelight recently. You can say that you're flushed with success. But people can be arrogant, but they can't be too arrogant. Didn't you notice the flaws in the way those two girls talked? Guan Qinghan frowned and said, "Flaws? I also know that their words aren't true, but I haven't found any specific flaws. Sister, please enlighten me." Da Xiao approached her with a calm face. They claim to be from Tianxiang City. Moreover, they're the descendants of a drug dealer. Moreover, they know who you are, but they still took the initiative to come with you. This is a big flaw. Guan Qinghan snorted. How is this a flaw? It's because they're also from Tianxiang City that they're willing to come with us. It's not strange that they know who I am. The Xiao family has already called me by my name many times. So, it would be strange if they didn't know who I am. They were in trouble with the Xiao family. So, I helped them out. Isn't that a chivalrous act? Jun Daxiao asked in confusion. Guan Qinghan was speechless. She was silent for a while. Then, she finally said, Master Jun's son Xiao, don't tell me you don't know what kind of reputation you have. How bad is it? If these two women were truly from the Tianxiang city, then they would have fled as far as they could the moment they heard Jun Mo Xie's name. How could they possibly have rushed over? And they even took the initiative to come with us? Isn't this like sending sheep to the tiger's mouth? That's reasonable. I didn't think of this. What? Jun Moxie suddenly came to his senses. He pondered for a while. Then he suddenly said, What do you mean? Is my image in Tianxiang City so unbearable? This sentence made the two girls burst into laughter. Brother Mo Xie certainly has a good image, but it seems that I'm the only one in Tianxiang City who knows about it. Otherwise, Brother Mo Xie would have been cooked by someone else. Dugu Xiaoi pestered him and proudly hugged his arm. You're very clear about your image. Do you need me to explain in detail? Besides, I'm very puzzled. Since when do you have an image? Guan Qinghan rolled her eyes at him and said, Their previous lies are secondary. What I really mind is that they weren't being persecuted by the Silver Blizzard City's Xiao family when we arrived. Both sides were in a standoff. Note that they were confronting each other. In other words, they were at least strong enough to resist the Silver Blizzard City. But the most surprising thing is that the white-clothed girl, Mei Shuyan, and Mei Qian didn't seem to be acting strangely. Do you mean that they should have been protected by a powerful expert? Jun Moxie frowned. That's right. But you and the solitary eagle didn't discover the person protecting them. That's really strange. Guan Qinghan was a woman. So, she thought very comprehensively and meticulously. It's understandable if you couldn't discover it. But even the solitary eagle, one of the 8 great masters, couldn't discover even the slightest trace of it. So this is a big matter. What kind of formidable strength does this hidden expert have? Jun Moxie crossed his hands and paced around the tent twice. Chapter 427. Yes. What else? Jun Moxie nodded. If this conclusion is true, then there's a new question. If they really have such powerful guards, why would they come to the barracks to seek so-called protection? No matter how powerful their guards are, don't forget that this is the barracks. If 2 weak women enter the barracks, then their guards will have to remain hidden. If someone has bad intentions, then their guards may not be able to rescue them in time. Guan Qinghan sighed. So, I think that they must have some kind of self-protection ability. Guan Qinghan raised her eyebrows. And you and the solitary falcon haven't been able to see where this self-defense ability is. This is strange. Jun Moxie nodded again. I'm even guessing that the mysterious power of protection comes from the 2 women themselves. Guan Qinghan finally spoke out the deepest suspicion in her heart. That's the only way to explain all the mysteries. The more Guan Qinghan spoke, the more shocked she became. If we infer from this, then these 2 women may even be stronger than Senior Solitary Eagle. This analysis is certainly reasonable, but it doesn't seem very likely. Jun Moxie nodded heavily. In any case, they haven't shown any malice towards us so far. Their only request is to bring them back to Tianxiang City. That's all. I believe that all the doubts will be solved when we arrive at Tianxiang City. Now, we just need to prepare in secret. That's all I have to say. It's good that you're prepared. I'll stay with them, and I'll keep an eye on them. It's impossible for their words and actions to be flawless. Guan Qinghan breathed a sigh of relief and slowly stood up. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes. The conversation was over, and Guan Qinghan was clearly going home. This proves that I'm still disappointed tonight. Damn it, I might as well not have taken a bath. Jun Moxie was depressed. Guan Qinghan left without looking back. Jun Moxie was listless and was about to sneak into the Hongjun Pagoda to practice when he looked up to find that Dugu Xiaoi was still there, looking at him with her big round eyes. Why are you still here? What's the matter? Jun Mo Xie rolled his eyelids and asked. He had a belly full of untimely questions. Brother Mo Xie. Dugu Xiaoyi pursed her lips and moved closer. Can I discuss something with you? Jun Mo Xie shuddered. Dugu Xiaoyi's coquettish voice made all the hairs on his body stand up. Don't. Great aunt, if you have something to say, then just say it. If I can do it, then I'll definitely agree without any hesitation. It's not a big deal. I just want... When will you let me cook it again? Dugu Xiaoyi's pretty face was flushed, and she was extremely bashful. But she was very determined and persistent, as if she didn't care about anything else. What? Cook it again. How do I cook it? Jun Moxie opened his eyes wide. It was true that he wanted to be cooked, but it also depended on how to cook it. His thirst didn't mean that he was so hungry that he was willing to be ravaged by the aphrodisiac again. Little grandaunt, please spare me. Pity my small arms and legs. I really can't take the torment. No, this matter is not negotiable. The little girl raised her neck. What if the two of you go back and secretly bow to heaven and earth and get married? What then? Don't tell me you want me to be your concubine. If you don't agree, I'll force myself on you. Anyway, you can't not cook it. Be a concubine, force himself on her. Other than being tough, this girl's thinking was really advanced. Jun Daxiao was completely defeated by her. That, you're still young, you can't handle that. Besides, that matter still needs to be discussed between our two families. Jun Moxie wasn't making excuses, but it was the standard big truth. Although he was only 17 years old, the thoughts of his previous life were deeply ingrained in his mind. Asking him to make a move on a 16-year-old girl, Jun Daxiao still felt a little guilty. She was still a child. Say I'm young? You're only a little older than me, at most 1.5 years older than me. How am I young? I'm not young at all. Dugu Xiaoyi puffed out her chest, and suddenly there was a wave of turbulent waves. Jun Moxie was in the midst of his impulsive impulse, and suddenly he was stimulated to the point of nosebleed. Oh my God, are you trying to kill me? As for the family, there shouldn't be any difficulties. But today, Sister Mei Qian gave me an idea. Dugu Xiaoyi bit her lips, and her face blushed. If that's the case, there definitely won't be any obstacles between the two families. Huh? What? Jun Moxie scratched his head. She told me, as long as I go back with a big belly, then there won't be any problems. I'll just be a little tired. I can bear it. Dugu Xiaoyi's face was red, and her toes touched the ground, and her body twisted here and there as she whispered. What? Go back with a big belly. That's not a matter of tiredness. It's a matter of taking someone's life. Jun Daxiao was completely drenched in sweat. The uproar caused by Guan Qinghan hadn't calmed down yet, and it was still brewing like a storm. If I make you pregnant again, Jun Moxie didn't say anything and disappeared from the tent with a whoosh. If you don't want to leave, then I'll leave, all right? I can't afford to offend you, but I can still hide from you. Jun Daxiao directly moved his mind and directly entered the Hongjun Pagoda. Dugu Xiaoyi was bashfully waiting for a reply, and in a flash, Brother Mo Xie had already disappeared. This made this Missy unbearably angry. Jun Moxie, humph humph humph. Jun Moxie, humph. This Missy is considered one of the 2 peerless flowers in the capital. I can't handle you. Huh. I've been peddling celery for so many years, and I still can't catch a small leak like you? It was unknown where she learned this witty phrase from, but Dugu Xiaoyi didn't care whether it was fitting or not, and just mumbled it out. Her eyeballs rolled around twice, and she walked to Jun Moxie's bedside and sat down. She touched here and there, and suddenly let out a soft humph. She bit her lips for a long time, and suddenly made up her mind. She lifted the quilt and crawled under it. With 2 puffs, 2 small boots flew out from under the blanket. I'll let you run. I'll wait here, and I'll see what you can do. Today, you're going to force yourself on me, and this Missy will fight it out with you. Dugu Xiaoyi snorted twice in her heart, and still felt a little shy. Forget it, I don't care so much. And Dugu Xiaoyi only felt like her heart was beating like a drum as she smelled the scent of a man in the quilt, which was completely different from hers. This smell, isn't that unpleasant? although there was no one around, she still felt a little guilty. She sneakily peeked her head out to take a look, and there was no one around. So Dugu boldly went back inside the quilt. She took off her coat with a rustling sound and lay on her back with her hands as a pillow. She started to think, force yourself on me. How should I force myself on me? She waited and waited, but June Moxie still didn't come back. She waited for a while, but he still didn't come back. Then Dugu felt sleepy and felt that her eyelids were fighting to stay open. She yawned twice, and finally, she fell asleep. Level 1 sleep was the best way to rest, and the little lass slept very soundly. June Moxie withdrew and went into the Hongjun Pagoda. He carefully looked at the 9 swords that he had refined before and put them back in their original places after some thought. Then he picked a few medicinal ingredients and prepared to refine the pills again. He had received a message from Fatty a few days ago saying that the 2 kinds of pills that he had left in the capital were about to run out. This was his main source of income, so he couldn't afford to cut it off. So it was better to have a little more in reserve just in case. Therefore, June Moxie wanted to have a little more in reserve. Moreover, he coveted the pills that could increase his martial power the most. However, he could only refine the 10 years pill at the moment. However, there was another kind of pill called the bone-tempering pill that could be refined at the 3rd level of the Hongjun Pagoda. The advantage of this pill was that it could transform a person's bones. It could make them more compact and more coordinated. But it didn't have any other use apart from that. However, if this kind of bone-tempering pill and a kind of marrow-cleansing pill were to be used together, then the effect would be immediate. It could transform a mediocre martial artist into a martial arts genius in one fell swoop. Regardless of whether it was the muscles, bones, blood vessels, meridians, or even the dantian, everything would be transformed once again. It would be a true rebirth. However, it was a pity that the baptizing marrow pill was a product of the 4th level of the Hongjun Pagoda. June Moxie could only sigh helplessly at this moment. However, he still managed to refine a few bottles of bone-tempering pills and mysterious yang pills. In any case, isn't it good to let those stupid ox-like fellows improve the coordination of their bones and muscles? However, these were the thoughts in June Moxie's mind. However, he hadn't realized that the effect of this bone-tempering pill in the Xian continent was far greater than that of the 10 years pill. The 10 years pill could disregard one's rank and directly increase one's martial power by 10 years. Its effect was indeed heaven-defying and awesome, but it could only increase one's martial power by 10 years. Moreover, it was a one-time use. Repeated use of it wouldn't have any effect. However, the effect of the bone-tempering pill could obviously change a person's original aptitude. It could break the natural laws of bone formation and reassemble the bones. This was something that one couldn't even dare to imagine. One must know that there weren't any systematic pills in this world that could increase one's martial power. However, there were still some heavenly elixirs that could achieve the effect of increasing one's martial power. For example, the Tian Fa sacred fruit of the Tian Fa forest. However, a pill that could improve a person's body from the inside and break away from the natural laws of the world was even rarer. That was because no elixir had been able to achieve this since ancient times. He had finally succeeded in refining it. June Moxie tossed the small jade bottle in his hand and smiled in a very complacent manner. June Moxie felt the spiritual power of the Hongjun Pagoda pour into his body and replenish his previous losses. He smiled in satisfaction. My current progress is astonishingly fast. I've been unceasingly practicing the power of gold for the past few days, and this has resulted in a substantial consumption of the spiritual power in my body. But I've been able to continuously replenish it. Therefore, I've reached the middle level of the Tian Xian realm. Chapter 428. Then, he went on to list 15 of Junjian Tian's heaven-defying crimes. It was as if the heavens wouldn't tolerate it if Junjian Tian didn't kill Junjian Tian. One of the crimes was very interesting. Its specific content was, He trained his troops near the official's residence in the capital. He was suspected of intimidating the officials. Jun Tian immediately razed the official's residence to the ground and made it his own. Among the 15 crimes was Jun Tian's grandson Jun Moxie is hot-blooded. He bullied his widowed sister-in-law. He is worse than a beast. Guan Qinghan is the eldest granddaughter-in-law of the Jun family. She seduced her uncle. She is shameless. She corrupts the family's reputation. She is obscene and lascivious. She is extremely influential. His Majesty frowned as he looked at the old man. He seemed somewhat impatient. Kong Lingyang became more and more agitated as he spoke. Then he suddenly raised his voice. I believe that a traitor like Jun Tian who has committed such heinous crimes should be pushed out of the Meridian Gate and beheaded in public. Jun Wui is licentious and shameless. He has disregarded military rules. He should be immediately dismissed from his post. He should be sent to the heavenly prison. He should be tried by the 3 departments. As for Jun Moxie and his sister-in-law, they were filthy to the extreme and should be executed by 1,000 cuts to serve as a warning to others. Guan Qinghan is shameless. She should be given a cup of wine and a piece of white silk to show the world that the rules of Tianxiang are in order. This old man is too vicious. He wants to exterminate the entire Jun family. Du Gezongheng and his son grinned. He didn't mention exterminating the entire family. But such a punishment was more severe than exterminating the entire family. There were 3 members of the Jun family, and he had nominated them to be beheaded. Jun Tian was sitting with his head drooped. He didn't ask anything. It seemed as if he was about to fall asleep. I second the motion. I also second the motion. Everyone in the hall fell to their knees. They were asking the emperor to severely punish the Jun family. Many of the aristocratic families were hesitating. They were watching the wind. The king frowned harder and harder. Your Majesty, this official believes that Jun Tian has been shielding his own people for the past few years and has long since lost his position and demeanor as a pillar of the empire. If we can take this opportunity to eradicate the Jun family and restore discipline to the imperial court, then it would be a great thing for our Tianxiang's 10,000 years of foundation. Grandpa Jun couldn't help but raise his eyebrows at the person who had spoken. He knew that there would be people who couldn't help but hit him when he was down, but he didn't expect that the first one to stand out would be him, the head of the Song clan, an imperial general, a marquis of the first rank, Song Di Hai. Marquis Song's words are reasonable. His subject agrees. The head of the Meng family, Meng Yue, stepped forward, his face filled with grief and indignation. Jun Tian is now a malignant tumor of the empire. It will be difficult to bring peace to the world if we don't get rid of him. It will be difficult to bring order to the imperial court if we don't get rid of him. It will be difficult to convince the people of the world if we don't get rid of him. Your Majesty, please make up your mind and make a decision soon. Your Majesty, please make up your mind and make a decision soon. Everyone shouted in unison and prostrated themselves on the ground. The 7 aristocratic families of the capital had gathered here today. The Murong family had always remained neutral, and the Tang family had always been on the same side as the Jun family. However, the other families had stood against the Jun family. However, the Jun family's biggest political enemy, the Li family, hadn't made an appearance in this attack. This matter is of great importance. We'll discuss it tomorrow. The emperor shouted in a deep voice. Everyone, please rise. The emperor was about to withdraw from the court when he heard old Master Kong's voice. Your Majesty, please stay. Your Majesty, please stay. We hope that your Majesty will make a decision soon. This matter can't be delayed any longer. Indecisiveness will only lead to chaos. Your Majesty is wise and powerful, so you should understand this principle. Kong Lingyang didn't get up and took the lead in shouting slogans. His meaning was very clear. We won't get up if you don't deal with the Jun family today. The emperor's brows tightly wrinkled as he gritted his teeth. I'm feeling unwell. The court is dismissed. Then he flicked his sleeves and ran away like a wisp of smoke. It's none of my business if you want to kneel or not. You want to threaten me with this? You must be out of your mind. The emperor also wanted to use this as an excuse to deal with the Jun family. But he didn't dare to. He was the emperor of a country. So, he thought much further than most people. Perhaps these rotten scholars couldn't think of it. Or perhaps they had thought of it, but didn't think that it was a big deal. However, the emperor knew that the Jun family's 4 marshals had great influence in the military. He didn't even need to use his knees to think that if he were to make a move against the Jun family today, then he wouldn't even be able to touch Old Man Jun. In fact, he believed that there would be news of a mutiny before dawn. In fact, there would be at least 5 or 6 such news within 3 days. Then, what would happen to the Tianxiang kingdom? Moreover, how could the Jun family be dealt with so easily? What kind of joke is this? I would have dealt with it long ago if I could. Why would I wait for you to submit a memorial? The emperor left in a violent rage, and the ministers also withdrew from the hall. Junjian Tian was in a daze in the main hall, but he was brimming with energy as soon as he came out. However, Junjian Tian didn't care about these rotten scholars who were trying to impeach him. In fact, he didn't care about them at all. The Mu Rong family and the Li family would have been involved in this attack. That would have been the most serious situation. However, this small battle array couldn't arouse the old man's fighting spirit. Junjian Tian, you raised your son, but you didn't teach him. You allowed your grandson to commit evil deeds. Do you still have the face to live in this world? You just wait. You'll get your retribution. Kong Ling Yang's body trembled as he shouted. Most of the civil officials in the imperial court were under his and Mei Gao Jie's tutelage. So, he was very confident that he could set off a frenzy of public opinion. Moreover, the old man Kong was certain that he could take down the Jun family in one fell swoop since he had the evidence to use against them. Junjian Tian stopped and turned around to look at him. He snorted and said, I say, old bookworm, can't you shut your old bird's mouth? This old man is very annoyed. I don't have time to deal with you. Let's see who's better tomorrow if you have the ability. Kong Ling Yang's beard trembled in anger. You. Junjian Tian rolled his eyes. Then, he turned around and walked away. A civil official moved closer to old man Kong's ear. Teacher, the Jun family is full of experts. Junjian Tian is the legendary peak of Tianxian. He's the #1 expert in our imperial court. So, teacher must be cautious. Peak of Tianxian, #1 expert? So what? Kong Ling Yang's dim, old eyes ferociously looked at this disciple. Then, he said disdainfully, You're nothing more than a martial artist. What's there to be afraid of? Haven't you heard of the saying, literature can bring peace to the world, but martial arts can bring peace to a region? Talent can decide the fate of the empire. Do you understand? How can a mere martial artist enter the Hall of Elegance? Yet, you didn't even think of handing over a memorial to apologize and defend yourself in such a situation. The outcome of this matter has already been decided. So, how can such an ordinary person enter this old man's eyes? Junjian Tian is the peak of Tianxian in the old man's mind. So, what if you're Xinxian? But you're still a martial artist. And you're a martial artist. So, it means that you have no brains. So, you're useless. It had to be said that the old man had studied Confucianism since he was a child. But it was difficult for him to step out of his ivory tower. So, he didn't have enough understanding of the dreadfulness of Tianxian and Shanxian. Tell everyone who isn't here today to come tomorrow. Then, we'll wipe out the Jun family in one fell swoop. Kong Ling Yang snorted coldly and said, Also, all the high-ranking officials of the border regions must urge them as soon as possible. We must create the greatest public opinion in the capital. This teacher won't allow such a filthy thing to exist. How can such an unscrupulous and shameless family exist in Tianxiang? What qualifications do they have to stand tall in the imperial court? Today's momentum seems big, but it's still not enough for the Jun family. Lord Meng, you'll have to go to Imperial Preceptor Li in person. Kong Ling Yang turned his head and said, Don't worry, Master. I won't shirk my duty. Meng Yue patted his chest and guaranteed, "The Grand Preceptor has been unhappy with the Jun family for a long time. So, this business will go smoothly." "Huh?" Everyone looked at each other and laughed. In the distance, "What do you think?" Morong Fengyun asked Dugu Zongeng. Great General Dugu Wudi silently followed behind the two old men, his rough, hairy face constantly twitching. "How about it? Don't you see that old man Jun doesn't seem to care at all? Those pedantic scholars have nothing better to do. What a bunch of idiots." Dugu Zongheng raised his head in disdain. "Let that old man Junjian Tian push them down on the bed one by one. I guarantee that they won't be able to attend court tomorrow." Murong Fengyun was infuriated. "You're the head of a clan. Can't you speak more elegantly?" Elegant? The word refined is better than the word refined. Dugu Zongheng spat out a mouthful of saliva. "I'm a general. Since when have you ever seen a general fight in a refined manner? You're just blowing your own horn. It's this old man's fault. I told you to be refined. That was a big mistake." Murong Fengyun was full of regret. "But I'm asking, how confident are we in this attack? Old Man Jun is as stable as Mount Tai, but Old Master Kong's side is also very powerful. Can Old Man Jun really withstand it? Why can't he withstand it? I'll be honest with you, those pedantic scholars don't have any confidence." Dugu Zongheng snorted twice and looked at the other group of civil officials with disgust. "It would be a huge joke if these fellows could topple Old Man Jun. If this attack succeeds, I'll immediately castrate myself, put on a skirt, and get married." F***CK. Murong Fengyun cursed. "I won't marry. Get lost. Old Murong, I asked you, which side are you on? Are you trying to sit on the fence again?" Dugu Zongheng glared at him. "So what if I'm sitting on the fence? Safety first. You asked me, what are your plans?" Murong Fengyun narrowed his eyes like an old fox. "Do you think I can stand in the middle like you? Naturally, I'll be tied to Junjian Tian. Who wants to stick with those pedantic dogs?" Dugu Zongheng grinned. "Besides, our families are relatives by marriage." "What? Relatives by marriage?" Murong Fengyun was shocked. "When did this happen?" "Bah, don't mention it. Our family is unlucky." Dugu Zongheng became angry at the mention of this matter. He turned around to look for trouble with his son, but Dugu Wudi was very obedient. He had already run away the moment he heard about this matter. The old man turned around, but there was no one there. He couldn't help but curse. "Bastard. Just you wait, you little bastard. I'll deal with you twice if you don't let me vent my anger now." Chapter 429. Today's first update. Second update in progress. The Li family. The Grand Preceptor Li Shang was sitting in his armchair. His face was covered in wrinkles. The Grand Preceptor's health had been deteriorating day by day. He was no longer as good as he was before. "Yuran, what do you think our Li family should choose this time?" The Grand Preceptor looked at his grandson. Li Yuran had black hair and a white robe. Her face was like jade, and the scar on her face had disappeared at some point. She smiled and said, "Grandfather, your master is joking with me again. This isn't the best time to deal with the Jun family. It's best for our Li family to stay out of this." "Oh, you're also worried about Junjian Tian?" The Grand Preceptor's eyes revealed a complicated expression. "No, I'm not worried about Junjian Tian, nor is it the blood General Junwui. It's the Jun family's third young master, Jun Moxie." Li Yuran sighed. She seemed a little lonely. Junjian Tian is old and ruthless. He's naturally difficult to deal with. But he's a gentleman. Jun Wui stands out from the crowd. He's invincible, but he's also a man of character. Even if such people have monstrous power and invincible Xian skills, we know where their weaknesses lie. Blindly setting them up can harm the enemy invisibly. In a contest of strength and wisdom, wisdom will always prevail. But this Jun Moxie has thoroughly confused me. Li Yuran had a faint smile on her face, but there was a trace of doubt in her eyes. After so many years, I've never been able to see what kind of person Jun Moxie is, or rather, where his weaknesses lie. This is undoubtedly a fatal point. From Jun Moxie's childhood to adulthood, he has weaknesses everywhere. Every one of them is enough to be fatal, and the entire Jun family will be done for. But when it comes to dealing with him, I've discovered that these weaknesses are merely a smokescreen. If I were to use these weaknesses to attack him, it would only backfire. Your analysis is very good. We must observe Jun Moxie carefully. Grand Preceptor Li Shang coughed twice. He had been quietly listening to Li Yuren's analysis. Now, he spoke, but you have to remember one thing. Although Jun Moxie did not reveal any weakness, he is still a young man. Young man? What does Grandpa mean? Li Yuren was puzzled. Young people, no matter how talented they are, will always be hot-blooded and impulsive. Li Shang chuckled. Even someone as wise and far-sighted as you was once slapped twice by Jun Tian, resulting in a blood feud. I still can't forget it. In front of me, do not deny. This, to you, is your weakness. Yes. Li Yuren lowered her head and listened. Secondly, no matter how resourceful a young man is, no matter how patient he is, love will always be the greatest weapon against a young man. Li Shang narrowed his eyes. Although Jun Moxie has never shown it, I can conclude that Jun Moxie's biggest weakness is women. Women that he cares about and recognizes. Take the present, for example, Guanxing Han or Dugu Xiaoi. Grandpa is right. Li Yuren was convinced. The older, the wiser. Of course, your heart can already be considered as cold and callous. However, some time ago, when you were plotting against Princess Ling Ming, weren't you also depressed for a period of time? Li Shang narrowed his eyes, and a sharp glint flashed out. Don't tell me you didn't. Yes, during that time, I was very irritable, Li Yuren admitted frankly. Li Shang nodded with satisfaction. And the third place for a young man to attack is his family. For Jun Moxie, Jun Wui, and Jun Tian are his family. Previously, when his father and brother had died, Jun Xie had deliberately endured it, or perhaps he had been hiding it. But in the end, he was still very young. So, he might not have been able to understand the pain of being separated by life and death. But now, he was already an adult. So, he naturally understood it. So, he would cherish it even more. But at this time, if one of them were to suddenly die, it would definitely be an immeasurable blow to Jun Xie. These are the 3 ways to deal with Jun Xie that you think you can't handle. Li Shang warned, remember, there is no enemy in the world that you can't deal with, and there is no one who has no weakness. This is very important. Yes, I will always remember grandfather's teachings. Li Yuren straightened her body and solemnly accepted the advice. It was undeniable that the older the ginger was, the spicier it was. The Grand Preceptor Li Shang was a scholar. He didn't have outstanding military exploits, but did he have outstanding Xian strength? But he was still able to stand on equal footing with Jun Tian and Duge Zonghong. So he had his own profound points. People like Jun Moxie and Li Yuren were talented and peerless, but they were inferior when it came to capturing the dark side of humanity. Even Jun Daxiao, who had lived 2 lives, couldn't compare. Yuren, Jun Xie, still needs to be taken seriously in addition to the 3 weaknesses he had mentioned a moment ago. The Imperial Preceptor Li spoke in a leisurely manner. Is there another weakness? Li Yuren was naturally interested. You can say that. In any case, you will not make a mistake if you treat him seriously in the future. That weakness is Jun Moxie's character. Grand Preceptor Li Shang flipped through the thick documents on the table in front of him. The documents were a foot thick, and there were 3 stacks. They were Jun Moxie 1, Jun Moxie 2, and Jun Moxie 3. It was obvious that these documents were all about Jun Moxie. All of Jun Moxie's actions, including eating and going to the toilet, were also recorded. Moreover, the analysis of professionals was also interspersed in these documents. Many a little makes a mickle, and it had converged to such a scale. Jun Moxie's character? Li Yuren frowned. She seemed to be deep in thought. Jun Moxie's character and ability had never entered the scope of our vision. We would only think of him when we could make use of him. But we started to collect relevant information about him 3 months ago. Then we gathered all the information. Then more than 30 strategists discussed it together and wrote it down. But We didn't expect that our information would surpass that of any of our opponents. But we couldn't find any of his weaknesses even with such detailed information. Li Yuran, really admire him. If it wasn't for Grandpa's guidance, I would have no clue at all. There was no doubt that Li Yuran's smile was very bitter. But there was a hint of heartfelt admiration in that bitter smile. That's right. Jun Moxie's weaknesses. Even the weaknesses that I've mentioned are just the common weaknesses of young people. Whether they can be applied to Jun Moxie or how to use them, we still need to think about it. If we fail and alert him, based on Jun Moxie's intelligence and methods, he may not give us a second chance. Li Shang coughed twice. But Grandpa mentioned that Jun Moxie's character is something that we need to take seriously, but he didn't explain it in detail. I'm willing to listen to Grandpa's advice. Li Yuran nodded her head slightly. Her eyes were deep. How should I put it? I've thought about it over and over again. Jun Moxie's character may not be his weakness. Even if it is a weakness, it is also his strength. The wrinkles on Li Shang's face became deeper. It's really hard to grasp. At least, we can't grasp it now. That's why I asked you to take it seriously. Yuran, tell me about your impression of Jun Moxie. Based on your understanding of him, what is his character? Jun Moxie. He is undoubtedly very wild and arrogant. He often appears in a high-profile manner. He only needs a moment to attract everyone's attention. However, he also makes everyone loathe him. In fact, he even makes them want to avoid him. But it's only after a long time has passed that people will realize that he was the one who took the biggest advantage of that incident. Li Yuran pondered for a while and said slowly, but this person was very despicable a few years ago. It's hard to believe that he pretended to be like this. But his real change should be in the last 6 months. I don't understand this point. How could there be such a huge change in such a short period of time? It's unbelievable. Is it really hard to understand? In fact, if everything was simplified, it would not be difficult to understand. Let's assume that Jun Moxie's innate talent is brimming with talent. But he's a man with no ambition. He doesn't want to fight for anything. He only wants to live his life as he pleases. Then, wouldn't everything make sense? Li Shang's voice was unusually dull, but his words contained a lot of meaning. Li Yuran's eyes lit up when she heard this. But she didn't say anything. She knew that her grandfather must have something else to say. If my assumption is true, then many things can be easily solved. We have always wanted to eradicate the Jun family. But if we don't do anything about it, the Jun family's influence in the military will disappear after Old Man Jun dies. That's because Jun Moxie won't inherit the Jun family's power. He didn't have that intention from the beginning. It's a pity that fate makes fools of people. Others may not be aware of the changes in the last 6 months. But I'm very clear about it. Li Shang sneered softly, because 6 months ago, Jun Tian felt mentally and physically exhausted. So, he started to make arrangements for his funeral. In other words, the Jun family survival is at stake. So, Jun Moxie had no choice but to change. It was also 6 months ago that Old Man Jun proposed to His Majesty that Jun Moxie should marry Princess Raimu. This is tantamount to telling Jun Moxie that I can no longer support this family. I can only do my best to make arrangements for the future. I hope that I can find a way out for the third generation so that the grandfather doesn't die today and the grandson doesn't have to die the next day. However, the emperor doesn't even care about this. Chapter 430. Li Shang's voice was very dignified. Yuran, do you understand? The source of motivation for Jun Moxie's change is precisely that pressure. It is precisely this kind of strong pressure that forced Jun Moxie to stand on the stage. When all the conditions in the world force a person to change, even the most cowardly person can become a hero. But you don't have this kind of pressure. Therefore, Jun Moxie's change is unexpected, but also reasonable. Li Yuran pondered deeply. Then, he slowly nodded his head. Li Shang's conjecture was admittedly reasonable, but he would never have thought that following the path of his conjecture would only lead to more and more deviation. Because this Moxie is not that Moxie. Even a slight difference can lead to a huge error, let alone a wrong starting point. Regarding this June Moxie, Grandpa will give you another piece of advice. If you don't have full confidence that you can kill him in one strike, then you must not push him too hard. Li Shang raised his white eyebrows, smiled, and said, "What you want and what our Li family wants is nothing more than power." However, what Jun Mo Xie wanted wasn't power. In fact, he didn't even care about power. Therefore, Jun Moxie has no real conflict with us. The conflict between you and him is completely different from the conflict between me and Jun Tian. He ignores power? Why do you think so? Li Yuran raised her eyebrows. Who doesn't want to be a high official and have the power to overturn the world? Who doesn't envy the wonderful feeling of being above tens of thousands of people? Who doesn't want to wield the power of the world when awake and lie on the lap of a beauty when drunk? Why can Jun Moxie be independent and not think about this? He didn't believe it. He didn't believe it. In fact, this can be seen from Jun Moxie's every move. This person doesn't care about other people's opinions, nor does he care about life and death, honor or disgrace. Naturally, he didn't care about wealth, splendor, and wealth. He had the ability to spend hundreds of millions of his family's wealth with a wave of his hand, but he could also gather infinite luxury in a casual conversation. He has always been a person who looks askance at the world. He does what he wants, does whatever he wants, and is free and unrestrained. He doesn't want to be restrained at all. Li Shang sighed. He is such a person. Therefore, his goal is higher than ours. Taller than you. I don't want to admit this, but I have to. Taller than me. Taller than me. Li Yuran slowly chewed on this sentence and suddenly felt a burst of bitterness. What he had spent so much effort to pursue was completely disdainful in the eyes of others. For Li Yuran, who had always been proud and arrogant, this was a bitter irony. Yes, higher than you. I can see your ambition. I can see it clearly. Li Shang's sparse white eyebrows twitched slightly. Your life's goal is nothing more than the throne of the human world. Dominate an area and sit on the mountains and rivers for millions of miles. Even if you can't achieve it, think one step at a time. You want to be a duke and marquis for 10,000 generations. You want to be below one person and above tens of thousands of people. This is your goal. The wonderful taste of power can make you fall head over heels. You can give up almost everything for this wonderful taste. Yes. Li Yuran's gentle eyebrows twitched. She suddenly exuded a bloody, murderous aura. Generals and ministers have no guts. Men should strive for self-improvement. The emperor takes turns to be my family's emperor. I will rise up and revolt if I get the opportunity. I will establish my Li family's everlasting cause, the Li family's dynasty. But what Jun Moxie is pursuing is obviously the kind of superpower that transcends all living things. It's the kind that transcends the emperor's power. For example, the Silver Blizzard City, or the Shui Hun Manor. Li Shang sighed, and His Majesty is also very clear about this point. Therefore, he is much more tolerant than before. Of course, he is also very regretful. Grand Preceptor Li smiled meaningfully. I can understand His Majesty's regret after listening to Grandfather's teachings. But why is His Majesty even more tolerant than before? Could it be that His Majesty wasn't tolerant before? Li Yuran was puzzled. There seems to be an inside story here. Grand Preceptor Li smiled, but didn't answer. He said, "This is what you get for what you sow. Our Li family and the Jun family only have an old grudge between me and Jun Tian. Apart from that, there is no other conflict. And we are already old." "Grandfather, you mean?" Li Yuran was somewhat puzzled. From Grandfather's tone, can it be that such a huge hatred has been going on for 3 generations? Is he going to let it go? Yuran, you must remember that you must deal with people like Jun Moxie when it comes to dealing with the Jun family. That is, unless you have 120% assurance that you can exterminate his family in one fell swoop. Then, you must personally witness Jun Moxie's corpse in front of you. Li Shang closed his eyes. He seemed somewhat tired as he continued. Only then can you act. Otherwise, don't act blindly without thinking. Then this time's attack. Li Yuran lowered her head. Her soft hair draped over her shoulders and covered her face. So, she couldn't see her grandfather's expression. Li Yuran was shocked in his heart. His grandfather's words just now were exactly the same as what he had just said. Don't push him too hard if you don't have full confidence that you can kill him in one strike. These words had the exact same meaning, and grandfather had emphasized it twice. What does this mean? Li Yuran understood it very well. This shows that grandfather believes that I can't withstand Jun Moxie's counterattack, and the Li family's doomsday will come if Jun Moxie counterattacks. Li Shang didn't say this clearly, but both grandfather and grandson were well aware of it. Li Yuran couldn't accept this point of view. Everything will go according to your plan. You should know better than me what to do. I can't express my opinion on everything. The future of this family will ultimately depend on you. So as long as you think it's right, just do it. Don't worry about my feelings. Grand Preceptor Li closed his eyes tiredly and waved his hand. You only need to remember two things. Based on the current situation, don't go against His Majesty. As for Jun Moxie, you must be extremely careful. Keep everything under control. Don't provoke the bottom line of these two people. That way, our Li family will definitely be able to hold on until the clouds disperse. Li Yuran was silent. The conversation between the grandfather and grandson had finally come to an end. Although it was still early winter, Li Shang's room was already lit up with a big brazier. Previously, Li Yuran had always felt that it was too early to light the brazier at this time. It was too hot. But after today's conversation, Li Yuran suddenly felt a little cold. The cold went all the way to his heart. This kind of cold feeling made his abnormally tall and straight body shrink a little. He couldn't help but lean closer to the brazier. His handsome face was deep in thought. There was an extremely complicated expression on his face. He was indignant, unconvinced, and a little disappointed. Could it be that I'm that much weaker than him? I've been pursuing it bitterly, but I can't get it now. Yet, he hasn't even considered it. Unknowingly, that Jun Moxie has already surpassed me by several levels. Is he really that powerful? Is he that hard to match? Li Yuran sighed deeply. Li Shang squinted his eyes as he lay on the soft couch. He sighed inwardly. He naturally knew what his grandson was thinking. But, apart from analyzing the pros and cons, he could only rely on Li Yuran himself. Reporting to young master, the Meng family's head, Meng Yuwei, requests an audience with the master. A servant reported from outside the door. Tell him that the Grand Preceptor isn't feeling well. He needs to recuperate, so he can't receive any guests. The young master has gone out to deal with some matters, so he hasn't returned yet. Li Yuran's voice was full of exhaustion. Meng Yuwei's arrival must have been to discuss with the Li family how to deal with the Jun family. But Li Yuran was extremely unwilling to hear the words Jun family. Everything would have to wait until this storm had passed. Li Yuran smiled bitterly as he looked at the 3 thick piles of information on Jun Moxie. Then, he suddenly picked up a pile of papers and threw them into the brazier one by one. The flames in the room suddenly burned fiercely, and the embers shot up high. The temperature in the room also rose. But Li Yuran's face became more and more perplexed. The light from the fire caused his handsome face to turn red, which added a bit of strangeness to it. The sound of flapping wings could be heard in the sky. Then, someone reported, "Young master, there's news of the return of the Southern Heaven City's army." Li Yuran threw the papers into the brazier one by one. His movements were neither fast nor slow. Then, he said in a dull voice, "Come in. Read it." "Yes." A big man cautiously walked in. He bowed and opened the letter in his hand. Then, he read, "On the 9th day of the army's return, the Silver Blizzard City's Shao family's second elder, Xiao Buyu, led 5 strong Shunxian experts. The Snow Peak's 7 swords and 2 Tianxian experts blocked the way. Xiao Han fought to the death against Jun Wui. The Grand Preceptor Li's eyes suddenly opened, and he sat up. Li Yuran also stopped throwing the papers into the brazier. She became completely quiet. The big man jumped in fright and didn't continue reading. "Continue reading." Li Yuran clenched her teeth. Jun Wui defeated Xiao Han, and Xiao Han was crippled. The Silver Blizzard City's 7 swords joined the battle. but they were stopped by Solitary Eagle, one of the 8 great masters. Both sides fought. Xiaobu fought against Jun Moxie. Xiaobu fought against Jun Moxie. Li Yuren's body trembled as she suddenly raised her head. Yes, Xiaobu fought against Jun Moxie, but he couldn't win. Then, he was plotted against by Jun Moxie. So he took off his clothes and danced in public. Then, he committed suicide out of shame. Jun Moxie beheaded Xiao Fengwu. Then, he severed the legs of the Silver Blizzard City's 8th and 9th elders. Then, he pierced the chest of the Shun Xian's 6th elder. Finally, Jun Moxie fought against the 4 Shun Xian's great masters. And he won. The people of the Silver Blizzard City. But Li Yuren didn't listen to a single word of the report. She only felt a heavy shock in her mind. Then, her vision turned black, and her blood rushed to her head. The only thing left in her mind was this. Xiaobu fought against Jun Moxie, but he couldn't win. Then, he was plotted against by Jun Moxie. So he took off his clothes and danced in public. Then, he committed suicide out of shame. Jun Moxie beheaded Xiao Fengwu. Then, he severed the legs of the Silver Blizzard City's 8th and 9th elders. Then, he pierced the chest of the Shun Xian's 6th elder. Finally, Jun Moxie fought against the 4 Shun Xian's great masters. And he won. Jun Moxie fought against the 4 Shun Xian's great masters. And he won. Jun Moxie fought against the 4 Shun Xian's great masters. And he won. It seemed as if a thunderclap was ringing in her ears. In fact, she felt as if her soul had left her body and was floating in the clouds. Li Yuren's body swayed. Then, a large pile of documents fell from her right hand and fell into the brazier. The thick pile of papers had suppressed the raging flames in the brazier, and thick black smoke had started to rise from it. Chapter 431. Li Shang's dim, old eyes opened wide, and he didn't move for a long time. The room was filled with choking smoke. The 3 people rushed out of the room after a long time. They lifted the curtain, and thick smoke soared into the sky. It seemed as if there was a fire. The servants and guards rushed in with buckets of water. Li Yuren coughed a few times, and then returned to normal. She looked at the rising smoke and didn't speak for a long time. Li Shang took the eagle's letter and carefully read it from beginning to end. His complexion was unusually dignified. After a long time, the Grand Preceptor Li Shang slowly raised his head and looked at the thick smoke and the gloomy black clouds in the sky. He sighed and murmured, "I've tried my best to overestimate him, but I've still underestimated him. The heavens are destined to change." Li Yuren's complexion turned ugly, and she murmured, "Battling the 4th Shun Xian. Battling the 4th Shun Xian." This carefree young master had always been calm and composed, but today he had lost his composure for the first time in his life. At the same time, all the major forces and aristocratic families, including the royal family, had also received the news through their own intelligence network. The words and sentences used were similar, but they were all talking about the same thing. Tianxiang City had once again experienced an earthquake. It was earth-shattering, earth-shaking, and even earth-shaking. The news of Jun Moxie's shameless behavior had caused an earthquake when it had been spread back to Tianxiang City. And that earthquake hadn't subsided even now. Moreover, the influence of this incident had continued to expand under the manipulation of some people. The repercussions were getting bigger and bigger, and the voices of insults were getting louder and louder. Almost half of the people in Tianxiang City were waiting for that shameless guy to come back, and they were going to teach him a lesson. They were going to curse him to death. Even if they couldn't curse him to death, they were going to drown him with their spittle. The current Jun Moxie's reputation in Tianxiang City was even worse than that of Jun Moxie before he had crossed over to Tianxiang City. It was a synonym for shameless, dirty, despicable, filthy, and vulgar. Even Guan Qinghan was implicated. The streets and alleys, tea houses and taverns were all praising this adulterous couple and cursing them. It had to be said that the effect of the group of civil officials was very effective. The masses who did not know the truth were indeed easy to incite. After all, This kind of thing was destined to be unacceptable under the background of this era. Therefore, the literati successfully turned the city into a sea of condemning Jun Moxie. It was believed that as soon as Jun Moxie entered the Tianxiang city, he would immediately be drowned by these voices. Even if the young master could turn a deaf ear to it, could Guan Qinghan do the same? Could she withstand such an embarrassing situation? But now, this latest shocking news was like a bomb exploding, or perhaps it would be more appropriate to call it a nuclear bomb, setting off an even more turbulent uproar. Everyone who heard the news had the same reaction. Dumbfounded, as if they had been struck by lightning, and they couldn't believe it. Apart from the group of pure literati who were still somewhat disapproving, everyone else felt as if they had lifted a rock and dropped it on their own feet. Jun Sunshao is so fierce. How can he be so fierce? He actually single-handedly fought against the 4 great Shenxians and won a complete victory. Damn! Everyone who knew what Shenxian was felt a chill in their hearts. One person single-handedly fought against the 4 great Shenxians? Isn't that at the level of a supreme? Isn't that invincible in the world? Doesn't that mean that the current Jun family is already equivalent to a super existence like the Silver Blizzard City? Or even an ultimate existence that was even more powerful, making things difficult for such a terrifying force? Isn't that looking to die? Some people quickly stood up to clarify the truth. They had just started spreading rumors yesterday, and now they had to step up to clarify it. However, once the rumor was spread, no one could control what kind of effect it would have. As the saying goes, it is better to guard against the mouths of the people than to guard against a river. Not to mention this kind of strong gossip, it would spread even faster. Not to mention that those were not just rumors. Most of it was the truth. As for those pure literati, they only knew the difference between the civil and the military. They only knew that all things are inferior, but only knowledge is superior. They only knew that Xin cultivators were martial artists, or in other words, the legendary rangers. Even if it was Shan Xian, he was only a slightly more advanced martial artist or a ranger. However, even if he was a legendary ranger, he still had to accept the restrictions of the law. Nothing could be accomplished without rules. These people did not believe that there was someone in this world who could really transcend the imperial power and stand alone in this world. In fact, when a martial artist reached a certain realm, he or she could even override the imperial power. To them, this kind of theory was even more ridiculous. The land under the heavens belonged to the king, and the people who ruled the land belonged to the king. The matter of Jun Moxie killing Shan Xian reached the ears of Mei Gaojie. The old man curled his lips, snorted twice, and said, "His crimes haven't been judged yet, and he's already involved in a murder case. This Jun Moxie is so cruel, heartless, and stubborn. 10,000 deaths won't be enough to atone for his crimes. The world won't be at peace if he doesn't die." A murder case, such an earth-shattering event, had shocked the entire world. But it had become a criminal case in the mouth of this old man. In short, the current Tianxiang city was like a public toilet in midsummer. A brick had been thrown into it after a rainstorm, and the maggots had been stirring up in a frenzy. Inside the imperial palace, the emperor was complaining to his wife and daughter in front of the empress when he received the news. You say, this Jun Moxie, can't he just calm down for a bit? First, he created a big mess in the capital. Then, he patted his buttocks and went to the Southern Heaven City. Then, he went to the Southern Heaven City and behaved himself. But he stirred up such a filthy matter. Everyone would have laughed at this matter if it had happened to someone else. But it happened to Jun Moxie. So, it's undoubtedly the best opportunity to attack. Don't forget that Jun Moxie had insulted those great scholars in front of all the civil and military officials. Moreover, that old man Jun Zhantian has always looked down on the political side. So, how could he not throw stones at someone who's down the well? The emperor's expression was very pained. He seemed to be exasperated at the fact that Jun Moxie hadn't lived up to his expectations. The empress sat on one side with an unusually cold expression. It seemed as if she hadn't heard these words. But it also seemed as if she had heard them. Princess Raimu's face was somewhat gloomy and anxious. She was looking at her father with an anxious expression on her face. This kind of situation had been happening in the imperial palace every once in a while. The main purpose was to find an excuse to talk to the empress. But this time, the topic of conversation was June Moxie, and the result was the same every time. The empress's face was cold. She was like an ice sculpture. She didn't say a word. Then, the emperor would sigh and leave after he finished talking. Ever since Princess Raimu could remember, she had seen her father and mother like this. In her heart, she felt that her father was very pitiful. He had lived like this for more than 10 years. How could he continue living like this? No matter what, her father was the monarch of a country. He had humbly fawned on a woman for 10 years. Such infatuation should be enough to prove everything, right? But her mother hadn't changed at all. Why? Uncle Yu was also very pitiful. Her father was also very pitiful. Princess Raimu was very sympathetic towards these two infatuated men. She didn't even know what she should do. She didn't know which side she should stand on. How long had this situation been going on? The emperor only knew that it had been a long time. It was so long that he had forgotten the date. But the empress remembered it clearly in her heart. Originally, she was also the mother of the world, and the husband and wife treated each other with respect. However, after little Ling Ming was born, the emperor was so happy that he got carried away. Finally, in a drunken stupor, he said something that the empress should never know. That was the real reason why Yi Guhan's family was exterminated. Since then, the Cold War between the emperor and the empress had lasted until now. But there was still no sign of thawing. Perhaps there would never be a day when the empress would thaw. This time was no exception. The emperor sighed. Finally, he finished his words. Seeing that his wife still didn't respond, he stood up and was about to leave. He was used to it. It would be strange if the empress really responded to him. But this time, it was really out of his expectation. A strange thing happened. You don't need to tell us what June Moxie is like in the capital. Everyone knows it. But he went to Tiannan because you sent him to die. Now you're talking as if you were innocent. Your Majesty, why do you always use this kind of method to show yourself? Can't you use another method? The empress said slowly. The emperor turned around like a whirlwind. What did you say? Do you know what you're talking about? Of course I know what I'm talking about. I am saying that you can't be so shameless. As the monarch of a country, don't you think it will damage your image by doing this? A real man dares to take responsibility for what he has done. Can you be called a real man now? The empress said slowly and clearly. The emperor was surprised. She had never responded to his words before. He had also mentioned June Moxie before, but she had never said anything. But today, she was totally different from her usual self. Moreover, for his sake, he deliberately inverted the truth and sharply rebuked him. This was the first time in more than 10 years. Why? Why? All these years, he had always felt guilty towards her. He had always wanted to make it up to her. After all, it was a dream of his when he was young in her memory. The empress had always been dignified and elegant. She had never lost her temper. Even if she was unhappy, she would rarely speak so sharply. She had only been so agitated once after she knew about that incident. But today, Princess Raimu looked at her father and mother in fear. She was used to the Cold War between them. Raimu couldn't imagine the changes outside of the Cold War. She didn't know what to do. I am shameless? Why do you always say I am shameless? Why do you say I am shameless? The emperor was furious. I am the emperor. I have to think for the whole country. I have to think for the people. What did I do wrong? I hold up the sky for billions of people. Why can't I be called a real man? Chapter 432. For the country? For the people of the world? What a great reason. What a dignified one. Why don't you say that you're thinking about yourself? Because of your selfishness. Because you are afraid of death. Because you're afraid of being overthrown. That's why you're suspicious of everyone. You don't trust anyone. You don't dare to trust anyone. You would personally promote a person, and then when he reached a certain position and had a certain amount of strength, you would personally beat him down into a bottomless abyss. never to reincarnate. You would then use this to announce to the ministers that you could do anything with a flip of your hand, and that there was nothing you couldn't do. Furthermore, he used these incidents to make one point clear to the officials. Those who obey him will prosper, and those who oppose him will perish. Do you still think that you are so noble? No. Is it true that those who follow will prosper? Those who obey you may not necessarily prosper, but those who defy you will definitely die. The Empress looked at him bitterly, and her eyes were as cold as ice. But now, you can't do anything, can you? That's why you're so emotional. Nonsense. What a womanly view. What do you know? The Emperor roared. In front of the Empress, he felt that all his restraint and pretense were completely useless. He could not control his anger at all. I'm spouting nonsense? Am I wrong? Did I wrongly accuse you? Then let me ask you, why was the Yi clan exterminated? The Empress laughed sorrowfully and suddenly stood up. Why was Jun Wuhui killed? Jun Wumeng, why was he killed? Jun Mo Yu and Jun Mo Cho. These two youths with limitless prospects, why did they die so young? Why did they die so young? Why was Jun Wuhui disabled for 10 years? Why did Dugu Xiong's corpse disappear? These things, all these things. How much do you know? How many reasons do you know? It was as if a scar deeply hidden in his heart had suddenly been exposed. His Majesty felt a heart-wrenching pain, an indescribable embarrassment, and even panic. His face began to convulse. He had originally thought that since the Empress had finally opened her mouth, he would argue with her for a while, and then argue again the next day. As they slowly argued, perhaps the relationship between husband and wife would return to normal. But now, he could no longer control his anger. The Yi family, Jun Wuhui, Jun Wumeng, Dugu Xiong. These names were like sharp steel needles that had pierced deep into his heart. In an instant, he felt as if his heart was bleeding. The pain seeped into his bones. If it had been someone else asking this question, the Emperor could have dismissed it with a laugh or avoided the question and covered it up easily. But it was Murong Xiao who asked this question. The person he cared about the most, the woman he loved the most, a woman of his dreams. She was the woman that he had dreamed of since he was young. He had been longing for her ever since he was a prince. In order to get her, he would not hesitate to pay any price, not hesitating to personally create the most disgraceful conspiracy in his life. Fortunately, she had finally become his woman. For her, he was willing to pay any price to ascend the supreme throne and rule over the world. For her, he had deposed the original empress. For her, he had endured for more than 10 years. For her, everything was for her. She had finally gone one step further and become his empress, his empress. But the happy days that he had longed for only lasted for a short 2 years. Everything would remain the same, but the people would change. Now, all that was left was the title of husband and wife. Between them, there was almost no connection at all. He had dreamed of it countless times at night. He hated her to death. He did not hate her for being unfaithful to him, nor did he hate that he could never win her heart. But he hated the person who was in her heart. If it wasn't for that person, everything would be different. This time, the assassination attempt on Princess Raimu and Yi Gahan's serious injuries had exacerbated the rift between them. So, he hated her even more. He had heard that that person was crippled. Not only was his right hand cut off, but his Xianqi was also destroyed. He would never be able to hold a sword or practice martial arts again. He was even more crippled than Jun Wuhui. Ha ha ha. When the Emperor heard this news, he felt a kind of cruel pleasure in his heart. This made his face a little twisted and a little spasm. I don't know much. I don't need to know much. But I only know one thing, and that is enough. Isn't that enough? She looked at him lang-lang. You weren't this excited even when the number one family, the Murong family, is in trouble. Why do you lose your composure when the Jun family is rising? Why? Can you give me a reason? Reason? What reason? What reason is there? A woman, talking about national affairs. You have your own world. You should live your life well. Why do you care about so many things? The Emperor became anxious and walked back and forth in big strides. I have a lot of things. After the 3 Jun brothers died and were crippled, The once glorious Jun family gradually declined in 10 years. There was no successor. You have been very happy, haven't you? You don't feel threatened anymore, right? You used the fall of a peerless divine general and the defeat of 400,000 soldiers in exchange for a happy feeling in your heart. What a good deal. Your Majesty must be very happy, right? The Empress said mockingly. Seeing the Emperor's wretched and irritable appearance, she actually felt a trace of inexplicable pleasure, as if she had vented her hatred. Thus, her words became even sharper. What do you know? What do you know? What do you know? The Emperor rushed over with a black face. His voice was shockingly loud. He no longer cared that his daughter was by his side. He opened his eyes maliciously. Do you know how unstable our throne was in those days? Our position was in imminent danger. The Tianxiang Empire was strong on the outside, but weak on the inside. Do you know how serious it was? You don't know. The Emperor bent down and waved his hand angrily. He then roared, You don't know. You never knew. You only know how to blame. You only know how to complain. You only know how to have baseless suspicions. You don't know. You don't know anything. Do you know how much I had to pay in order for us to reach this point? There are many things that I don't know, but I know one thing, and I know very clearly that everything had changed since Jun Wu Hui had taken command of the army for the first time. The Yutang Empire and the Shun Ci Empire still don't dare to invade our borders. Isn't this all thanks to the Jun family? Don't tell me you still dare to deny it. But you wanted such a talented and ever-victorious god of war to die. They had to think of every possible way and use every method they could and couldn't use, and every method they should and shouldn't use to kill him. I still don't understand why you were so short-sighted at that time. Princess Raimu's body shook. She covered her mouth with her small hands. She was about to let out a cry of alarm. Her eyes were full of horror and despair. Father, don't tell me you're right. Jun Wu Hui was a god of war and a famous general. No one in the world could compare to his divine foresight and strategizing. I admit all of this. I've never denied it. The veins on the Emperor's face were bulging. His eyes were burning with fanaticism. The two empires didn't dare to invade our borders easily because of Jun Wu Hui and Jun Zhantian. I know all of this. Do you understand? I know all of it. I know it very clearly. I know it much better than you. The Emperor roared in a low voice. His eyes were crazed. Why did you do it if you knew? The Empress stared at him. Don't tell me that you wanted to be the emperor of a subjugated nation. But do you know all of this? Did you know that only the Dugu family controlled the western side of the four great armies of the empire? Moreover, that side was the weakest one. Jun Wu Hui had 800,000 soldiers under his command. 800,000 soldiers. Do you understand the concept of 800,000? Do you understand? You don't. Jun Wu Meng had 500,000 soldiers. Jun Wu Yi had 250,000 soldiers. Jun Zhantian was the Grand Marshal of the Empire. Do you know what this number is? Do you understand what it means? The Jun family's four commanders controlled more than 1,550,000 soldiers, and the Empire only had 2,600,000 soldiers at that time. The Dugu family had 250,000 soldiers, and the Murong family had 200,000 soldiers. Then there was the Imperial Army, and even the Jun family's descendants in the Imperial Army. What does this mean? Do you understand? You still don't understand. So I'll tell you now. The Emperor's eyes were bloodshot. He lowered his head and said fiercely, This means that we can only wait to be killed if the Jun family decides to rebel. This means that my head, His Majesty pointed a finger at his own head and roared, I have always been under the same blade. It will be separated from my neck as long as this knife wants to fall. Do you understand? If you were me, would you allow such a family to exist? Disgraceful. But the Jun family has never rebelled. I know this, and I believe that you know this as well. I've always known this. Empress Lingling looked at him. She looked at him jumping around. Her eyes were still bitingly cold. The Tianxiang Empire would have belonged to the Jun family if the Jun family really wanted to rebel. Do you deny this? Do you deny it? They are loyal and good people. So, why are you unable to sleep or eat well because of them? Do you want to get rid of them? Chapter 433. You just said it yourself. How could I not know that the four generals of the June family are loyal subjects and good generals? I know it better than anyone else. Every monarch dreams of having such generals, but they can't sleep or eat in peace. I'm no exception. At that time, we had gained the upper hand against the two empires bestowed by the array god, Yu and Tang. We could have killed our way into their capitals as long as I, or Junwoo Hui wanted to. The war was already at its last moment, but I would have given up the opportunity to unify the world at that time. I would have suffered a crushing defeat and hundreds of thousands of casualties. I would have exchanged it for Junwoo Hui and Jun Wuming's deaths in order to achieve a balance. Do you think that I didn't feel pain in my heart? Then I don't understand. Why did you let go of the opportunity to unify the world? Not only did you let it go, but you were also willing to suffer a crushing defeat? Are you crazy? The Empress was really confused this time. Unifying the world. Of course, I want you to be my wife and my most beloved. That's my biggest dream. But what would I do if I unify the world at that time? What would I reward them with if I were to unify the world with the June family's strength? The only reward for that kind of achievement was to be bestowed with the title of king. However, the June family would then possess a terrifying number of fiefs. Moreover, they would also possess a sizable private army. In addition, they would also possess an unparalleled influence within the nation. This would be tantamount to creating a formidable opponent out of thin air. In fact, it would be an unrivaled enemy. It would be tantamount to me pushing myself to a dead end, and the June family would immediately rebel if I didn't reward them. So, it's because there's no reward and no title? What a ridiculous reason. The Empress was stunned for a long time. Then, she finally laughed. Is it really that ridiculous? Then let me tell you, it's not ridiculous. It's not ridiculous at all. Do you know that the generals of the past have needed the Tiger Tally to mobilize their troops? And the Marshal only has half of the Tiger Tally in his hands. The other half is with me. Only when the two halves of the Tiger Tally are combined can I mobilize the army. But did you know that? Any one of the four June family members had the ability to mobilize an army without the help of the Tiger Seal. No one disobeyed his orders. The entire army obeyed his orders. Do you know what that means? Junwoo Hui led his troops in a battle 12 years ago. I personally went to the military field to see him off. 800,000 soldiers and their war horses were as silent as ghosts at that time. After I finished speaking, the generals and soldiers cheered together. They actually had a rhythm to it. Do you understand? His Majesty's face contorted in a horrifying and ashamed manner. I don't understand. The Empress shook her head. The rhythmic cheering proves that it was rehearsed. After the cheers, the whole place immediately fell silent. Do you know what this means? His Majesty gritted his teeth and said, "Doesn't that mean that Junwoo Hui's army is very disciplined? You should be happy. Should you be angry that such an experienced army has such strict discipline?" The Empress was even more confused. You still don't understand me. Do you know what happened when I gave Junwoo Hui the Tiger Talisman command token? The muscles on the Emperor's cheeks twitched, and a look of humiliation appeared in his eyes. The entire army was cheering at that time. The banners were waving, and the war horses were neighing. It seemed as if the world had been turned upside down. It lasted for the time it takes to drink half a cup of tea. The golden cauldron and the jade seal in front of me were shaken by the sound waves. I was standing on a high platform at that time. I saw with my own eyes that 800,000 people's eyes were filled with fanaticism as they looked at Junwoo Hui. They raised their long sabers, and the entire sky was filled with coldness. Junwoo Hui only made one movement in such a passionate scene, and the entire army regained its tranquility. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. He took the tiger seal, raised it high above his head, and turned around to face the soldiers. His eyes swept across them, and he turned his body. That was the movement of his body. Do you know that it wasn't a deliberate movement? He needed to show the tiger seal after he turned around. Then, he needed to draw his sword and take an oath before he could speak. But the cheers of 800,000 people were cut off by a sword the moment he turned around. It stopped abruptly. It was so quiet that even the sound of a needle dropping on the ground could be heard clearly. The dust in the air was still rising, but on the ground, it was already absolutely quiet. He didn't even need to draw his sword. He didn't need to make any gestures. He only needed to turn his body, and he only needed to make a casual glance. And 800,000 people fell silent. Junwu Hui was very awe-inspiring. The general in white was very awe-inspiring. The Empress and Princess Raimu's hearts swayed as they listened. They were imagining the grand occasion of that day. They were imagining Junwu Hui's unrivaled, awe-inspiring might. And they couldn't help but be fascinated. "I knew that you would think like that. You're a pair of idiots," the Emperor said furiously, "but I was also there at that time. What place did I place myself in such a situation? What place did I place my prestige?" The cheers of the soldiers toward Junwu Hui were at least 100 times more than mine. In fact, it was even more. At that time, I had a feeling that if Junwu Hui had suddenly ordered these 800,000 people to commit mass suicide, then there would have been 800,000 corpses in front of me. In fact, the imperial palace would have been turned into a pile of rubble in an instant if Junwu Hui had ordered them to besiege it. In fact, he wouldn't even have needed to give an order. He would have needed only a simple gesture or a casual glance. And everything would have become a reality. The Empress sucked in a breath of cold air. She finally understood where the Emperor's misgivings had come from. Junwu Hui's influence was so huge that it was appalling. It was already very frightening that he could intimidate the Emperor. But the Emperor's life was in danger. So, he wouldn't rest until he was dead. Do you understand now? The Emperor smiled bitterly. The Jun family had 1,550,000 soldiers in their hands at that time. And the Dugu family's Dugu Di worshipped Junwu Hui to the bone. So he followed Junwu Hui's lead in everything he did. So the Jun family had a total of 1,800,000 soldiers in addition to the Dugu family's 200,000 soldiers. Moreover, the Jun family's direct subordinates had been placed in the city defense forces, protectorates, and other places. So they had no less than 200,000 soldiers. And the Jun family's generals had no less than 30,000 soldiers in the imperial army. And the total number of soldiers in the country was only 2,600,000 at that time. The Jun family had more than 2 million soldiers. Moreover, they were the most elite soldiers. And the rest of them were just miscellaneous troops. In other words, the troops that were under my command numbered less than 600,000. And that's the most optimistic estimate. You want me to feel at ease? How could I feel at ease? Would you feel at ease if you were me? How could I not know that the Jun family is loyal and upright? How could I not know that the Jun family is loyal and devoted? They have no intention of rebelling. But I would have done it even if I knew that the Jun family wouldn't rebel. I had no choice. The Emperor frowned in pain. It's because I'm the Emperor, and it's because I can't stand such a threat. No, I believe that any emperor would be able to stand such a situation. Indeed, which emperor would be able to endure such a situation? The tiger seal that controlled the entire army had lost its effectiveness. The Jun family's 4 great generals had the power to mobilize the army without the tiger seal. This meant that a change of dynasty could happen at any time. The Jun family may not rebel. They may not want to change the dynasty. But that doesn't mean that others won't think the same. You must know that Emperor Taizu didn't think of rebelling when he rose up. He loyally supported the Tianyu dynasty when it was in a precarious situation. But it would have been too easy for his subordinates to rebel. All they needed was a mutiny and a yellow robe. They could have forced him onto the road of the emperor, and he couldn't turn back. I've learned from my mistakes. Do I still want to hold on to my naive fantasies and wait for death? The emperor's voice was filled with grief and indignation. You're a descendant of the Morong family. Don't you know about Morong Qianxiu? Tianxiang Empire's predecessor was the incomparably glorious Tian Yu dynasty. The ancestor of the Yang family had a brilliant military record. He was as brilliant as Junwu Hui. He was invincible, and he was loyal to the imperial family. But his general, the ancestor of the Murong family, Murong Qianxiu, had failed to persuade him to rebel. So, he had led his troops to attack the imperial city and beheaded the Tianyu emperor and the crown prince. He had no way out from then on. He had slaughtered his way through the mountains of corpses and seas of blood to establish the Tianxiang Empire. And that mutiny had led to the Tianxiang Empire's current state. And the Murong family had established the Murong family's glory because of that success. There was only one Murong Qianxiu under the emperor's command. But how many Murong Qianxius do you think the Jun family's 4 great generals have? How many people would be more powerful than Murong Qianxiu if they wanted to? More serious? Let me tell you, there are at least 20 people who would be willing to risk everything for the Jun family. And Tianxiang Empire would be done for as long as one of these 20 people stands up. Do you understand? You're being too soft-hearted. The emperor roared in a low voice. His voice was full of helplessness and pain. Any emperor would want to take a peerless talent like Junwu Hui under their command. They would go on expeditions to expand their territory. As for me, when I have such a peerless talent, I still have to use all my means and methods to destroy him. Do you know how much pain I feel in my heart? Who doesn't want to bring peace to the world as an emperor? Everything under the heavens belongs to the emperor. Everyone who commands the land belongs to the emperor. The world trembles with a single order. The sea shakes with a single sentence. No one dares to disobey my orders. Who doesn't want to? I want to die too, but I have to give up. But have you ever thought that the Jun family's power was given to them by you? How could they have reached this level if you hadn't given them such power? Murong Xiu stopped halfway through her sentence. Chapter 434. You don't want to delegate? Can you? Can you? Tianxiang was besieged on all sides at that time. Junjian Tian was injured and could no longer manage the military. Dugu Zonghang was a brave man and couldn't handle the situation. The Yutang Empire sent 600,000 soldiers to invade the east. The Shunxi Empire sent 500,000 soldiers to attack the west. The Haishao Empire sent 400,000 soldiers to invade the southeast. The northern grasslands kings sent 400,000 soldiers to invade. The Tianxiang Empire was besieged on all sides. At that time, I ordered Junwu Hui to lead 200,000 soldiers to fight against the Yutang Empire's 600,000 soldiers and the Haishao Empire's 400,000 soldiers. Jun Wumeng and Jun Wui fought against the northern grasslands wolves, while Dugu Di and Murong Feng Yun sent 200,000 soldiers to fight against the Shunxi Empire's 500,000 soldiers. In this way, the Tianxiang Imperial Army was also transferred out, leaving less than 10,000 soldiers to guard the capital. At that time, I believe everyone thought that Tianxiang was finished. With such a disparity in strength, fighting on all sides was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. But who would have thought that Junwu Hui's military skills were so superhuman? He predicted the enemy's every move and burned Yutang for 3 months in the middle of winter. 7,000 miles of forests were burned to the ground. Even now, the largest tree in these 7,000 miles of mountains and rivers is no thicker than a man's thigh. And in these 3 months, he defeated the Haishao Empire's 400,000 soldiers and conquered 19 cities in a row. He even took all the captives under his command and increased the number of troops under his command to 800,000. In the end, he conquered the Soaring Sky Empire in one fell swoop and completely resolved the crisis in the south of Tianxiang. Then, he sent his troops straight to Yutang. His troops pressed down on the border and fought a series of battles. Step by step, he pressed forward and achieved the untarnished title of White General, Tianxiang's military god. And Jun Wumeng and Jun Wui didn't let their elder brother be the only one. They swept across the northern borders and fought against the wolves of the grasslands. From being at a disadvantage, they gradually equalized the situation. Then, they marched straight into the grasslands. I remember that back then, Jun Wui was only 19 years old. His battle robes were soaked in several layers of blood in every battle. He swept through millions of soldiers, and wherever he went, blood flowed and heads rolled. In one battle, he became the blood general, and his murderous aura dominated the world. Jun Wumeng was cold and merciless, enforcing the law like a mountain. His strict management of the army was rarely seen since ancient times. His words were the law, his orders were strictly executed, and his actions were swift and decisive. In every battle, he slaughtered all the captives, leaving no survivors. He was known as the iron-blooded god of war. It is also because of him that the population of the great grasslands has rapidly decreased and has yet to recover to this day. They do not dare to take a step recklessly against our dynasty. The prestige of the Jun family's 4 great generals spread throughout the world from then on. Following that, the battles in the north and south never ended. The prestige of the Jun family was growing stronger and stronger. The reputation of the White General, the God of War, and the Blood General was also growing stronger and stronger. I wanted to reduce the military power in just a few years, but it had already reached an uncontrollable situation. The entire world knows about the Jun family's 4 great generals, but not many people remember the Emperor of Tianxiang. The Jun family had already ruled over tens of thousands of miles of mountains and rivers. In fact, it wasn't just the mountains and rivers of Tianxiang, but the entire world. His Majesty the Emperor sighed as he spoke till here. Heroes are created by circumstances. This is a true saying. In just a short 3.5 years, every family in the Tianxiang Empire started to worship the memorial tablets of Jun Wu Hui and the others. Jun Wu Hui and his 2 brothers became the living gods of war of the Xian continent. They became an immortal legend. But to me, such a legend is like 3 extremely sharp steel knives. Steel knives that are hanging over my head. The entire nation rejoiced after the crisis was averted. But the nation's finances were also depleted, and they were struggling to move forward. But the empire's army had reached an unprecedented period of prosperity. The empire's territory had also reached an extremely glorious level. It had looked down upon the world, and the heroes of the world didn't even dare to look at it. The 4 seas were at peace for a while, and the external troubles had been eliminated. But the crisis in my heart had come so quickly. I believe that Tianxiang will become the ruler of the world when the world is at peace. Perhaps it will be Jun Zhantian or Jun Wu Hui, but it won't be me. And that's because Tianxiang may not be Tianxiang at that time. Princess Raimu's blood was boiling as she listened. She had heard about Jun Wu Hui's military exploits from countless people, but her imperial father was talking about his past glory from a high position, and it had touched Princess Raimu's heart. Such a heroic man, Jun Wu Hui. However, Jun Mo Xie was the only flesh and blood of this world-shaking hero. I can understand your concerns. In fact, I can even agree with them. But you plotted against Jun Wu Hui, Jun Wu Ming, and Jun Wu Yi. So, why did you plot against Jun Mo Yu and Jun Mo Cho as well? The Emperor's voice carried a hint of understanding. But she didn't understand. Her voice was still sharp. They were only children at that time, and they were the descendants of Tianxiang's greatest heroes. How could you bear to do that? How could your conscience be at peace? Jun Mo Yu and Jun Mo Cho were young, but they were already in the embryonic form of talented commanders. After a series of battles, his reputation in the army had risen to a point where it was as bright as the sun in the sky. If such a genius commander were to find out one day that their father and uncle were killed by my scheme, what would the result be? I've already betrayed the Jun family. So, what if I betrayed them again? I'd rather betray the entire world if they were in danger. Who in the world wouldn't I betray? The Emperor smiled sinisterly. Besides, there was no war in the 4 seas at that time. So, they were the only ones facing Yutang. Moreover, Yu Tang had been retreating in defeat. In fact, they had already sent envoys to sue for peace. I was afraid that there would be no more wars after that. So, I took advantage of the fact that their wings hadn't grown yet. And there's one more thing. The June family's deaths. I was merely pushing the boat forward. The Silver Blizzard City was the one who killed them. It was the Shao family. It wasn't me. What a powerful reason. You're truly shameless. The Empress sneered, but you're still slowly suppressing the June family after all that you've done. Only an old man, a cripple, and a debauchee are left of the June family. But you still haven't let them go. Why is that? What powerful reason is there for you to do this? Why? You're asking me why? The Emperor opened his eyes wide. He looked at her as if she was an alien. You're the one asking this question? You don't know? I really don't know. A family of meritorious officials, a family of heroes who had saved the Tianxiang Empire, they no longer had the ability to shake your emperor's position. However, they had always been suppressed by you for so many years, and they had never stopped being suppressed by you. I really don't understand. Why is this happening? Is this the so-called heart of an emperor? You'll betray them even if they don't betray you? The Empress' eyes turned even colder. Because I'm also a human. Do you understand? The Emperor lowered his voice and roared. Every time I face Junjian Tian, my conscience will be uneasy and my heart will be filled with guilt. Do you understand guilt? I feel sorry for him. I'm sorry for the June family. So, I feel bad every time I see him. I feel like I've lost face. My conscience is uneasy. My guilt will be gone as long as they're all dead. They'll disappear from my eyes forever. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understand. You've already betrayed the June family once or twice. So what's wrong with doing it again? I'd rather betray everyone in the world when I'm in danger. Who in the world can I not betray? You've harmed your benefactor. You've harmed the heroes of the empire. But you've done it for the sake of your conscience. The Empress was left speechless. She kept mumbling, conscience, conscience. So conscience is like this. Conscience can be explained like this. This is the first time I've heard of it. Are you a human? Do you have a conscience? That's really nice. She laughed coldly and said, Then why don't you continue to deal with the June family? Why are you protecting the June family now? Aren't you afraid of having a guilty conscience? Isn't it your wish to suppress the June family to the point of extinction with the help of June Moxie's incest? You must have a powerful reason for your sudden change of heart, right? It's because I can't figure out the June family's background, so I don't dare to act rashly. Who is the peerless expert behind the June family? The Emperor frowned. His dignified face was full of confusion. Will this person intervene if I destroy the June family? The Dongfang family had thrown more than 300 heads into the imperial palace for Jun Wuhui. But it was only a suspicion at that time. How can I act rashly without the Silver Blizzard City as a pretext to destroy the June family? So you're afraid, not because of the June family's achievements. The Empress sneered. You killed loyal subjects and slaughtered generals because you were afraid. Now you're afraid. So you don't dare to move. So you can only compromise. Is that right? Compromise for the general interest. How is that compromise? The Emperor was furious. Why are my actions so unbearable in your eyes? Why can't you stand in my shoes? Why can't you look at this matter with the eyes of an emperor? Why can't you weigh the gains and losses of the entire world? The eyes of an emperor have always been very shameless. The Empress's face was cold. The Queen's face was cold. I admire your conscience very much. How thick-skinned you must be to have such a great conscience. I'm also shocked by your great talent and strategy. And I admire your state of mind even more. How shameless can you be to maintain such a calm state of mind? I especially admire your emperor's aura, because you've allowed me to see all the ugliness in the world. But I'm very tired, so I hope that you can leave, okay? I always thought that you understood me, but I was wrong. You don't understand me at all. The Emperor said sadly, hundreds of thousands of people died when the Jun family was destroyed. But millions of people died when the Tianxiang family was destroyed. The rise of a dynasty doesn't only depend on famous generals. How can the emperor's helplessness, abandonment, and sacrifice be measured by common sense? Chapter 435. The empress looked at the ground expressionlessly. Her face was as cold as Ling Ling's. She was disheartened. You once said that I'm the person you love the most in this life. You targeted the Yi family for me. You have said that, and, at any rate, I believe you have a purpose. But the endless suppression of the Jun family is the result of the dark side of your heart. I'm just a woman. I can't do anything. I can't do anything. Since you dare to say such words to me today, I know that from now on, I will never have the chance to leave the imperial palace, right? The empress quietly raised her head and looked at him calmly. The emperor turned his face away. Otherwise, you wouldn't have said so much in front of me today. I've been going to Jun family a lot more during this period of time. Hee, it's just like how your suspicions have never stopped. But I'll only warn you of one thing. The empress suddenly raised her head. Her eyes were sharp and cold. Yi Gahan. The emperor's body trembled. He finally understood why the empress had responded to him. It was because Yi Gahan was under the protection of the Jun family. I hope you won't hurt him again. He was already a complete cripple. He has nothing now. In fact, he didn't have anything for a long time. Even the Xian skills he relied on to survive. The empress's voice was hollow. She looked at the magnificent imperial palace. Her eyes were empty and lifeless. But he still has you. Your heart. The emperor roared in a heart-wrenching manner. My heart has died since 18 years ago. The empress said, I don't mind that my body is dead. Plus, I have your heart with me. The emperor staggered back. A eunuch's report came from outside the door. Your Majesty, there's a letter from Tian. Bring it in. The emperor was silent for a long time. He supported his forehead with his hand. His face was full of defeat and frustration. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, Bring it in. His Majesty looked at the intelligence note that was rolled into a thin thread in his hand and slowly unfolded it. He only took a glance, and his pupils suddenly contracted. Then his eyes turned as sharp as an eagle's as he stared at the note, as if it was an irreconcilable enemy. Finally, his hand trembled, and the paper fluttered to the ground. The emperor's two hands were still in the position of unfolding the piece of paper. His eyes were dull and unmoving. His body seemed to have been struck by lightning, and he suddenly felt dizzy. He swayed a few times and almost fell down. Then he slowly bent down and picked up the note. He read it carefully again and sighed heavily. Then, as if he still couldn't believe it, he moved closer and read it word by word. His stalwart body swayed a few times, and his face suddenly turned deathly pale. The slip of paper was like a yellow leaf drifting in the wind. It left his hand and fell to the ground once again. But this time he did not pick it up. The contents of the note were more or less the same as those received by the aristocratic families. However, it was much more detailed. What caught the king's attention the most were a few sentences. Jun Moxie fought Xiao Buyu alone. Xiao Buyu committed suicide out of shame and anger. I suspect that Jun Moxie's strength has already reached the level of a great master. Jun Moxie inquired about the events of that year, and Xiao Buyu coincidentally confessed to the Bloodsword Hall. Jun Wui's legs recovered, and he fought and won against Xiao Han. Jun Moxie crippled Xiao Han. One of the 8 great masters, the solitary eagle of the prairie, is currently staying with the Jun family. The great master, the Bloodsword Hall, solitary eagle, Jun Moxie. The emperor muttered these words in a very strange voice. The Jun family, the emperor sighed deeply. Then he slowly closed his eyes. There was a deep exhaustion in the corners of his eyes as he slowly said, I regret that I was too soft-hearted in the past. But it turned out to be a disaster. His voice was somewhat hoarse and trembling. Then he hurriedly walked out. He was about to leave when he suddenly tripped over the doorsill. He staggered violently and nearly fell flat on his face. He was in a very sorry state. The guard stepped forward to help him up, but he had already stood up. He looked at the sky and suddenly thought of something. Then he turned his head and fixed his eyes on Princess Rima's face. Then he disappeared. Only the mother and daughter were left in the Empress' bedroom. They looked at each other in dismay. Princess Raimu's entire body trembled. She moved 2 steps and picked up the piece of paper from the ground. She felt that it was extremely heavy. She hated herself for listening to so many secrets today. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to Princess Raimu. In fact, it was difficult for her to bear. She had just seen a glimmer of happiness in the past few days, but it had been shattered by the Emperor's long-winded speech. Princess Raimu suddenly felt an emptiness in her heart. She looked at her mother and realized that her mother's eyes were exactly the same as hers. The mother and daughter looked at each other and saw the sorrow and despair in each other's eyes. They leaned against each other. After reading the piece of paper, the Empress's face showed an expression that was hard to tell whether she was crying or smiling. She sighed weakly and spoke with a deep sense of loneliness and melancholy. Princess Raimu was like a frightened deer. Her body trembled violently after hearing these words. Then she powerlessly fell to the ground. Her eyes were filled with fear and despair. Because the Empress had said, "You can escape the wrath of the heavens, but you can't escape the wrath of your own." It has come so fast. Heaven's law and retribution. Jun Moxie, Jun Wui, Tian Xiang is finished. Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao, who had been in the limelight in the eyes of others, had not been peaceful all this time. It could even be said that his journey had been filled with trepidation. His eyes were filled with thorns, scars, and vicissitudes of life. This was because there were too many strange things that accompanied the young master. It could even be said that there was a peerless expert that was specifically targeting him, carrying out endless and continuous pranks on him. It made Jun Dashao very annoyed. It was impossible to guard against it. There was nowhere for him to hide. For example, when he was riding a horse with a large group of people, a flock of crows suddenly flew across the sky. Then the crows suddenly had diarrhea. Wasn't that ridiculous? That wasn't all because everyone was fine. The crow's excretion was accurate. Only young Master Jun and his horse were completely drenched. No normal person would have thought that a flock of crows flying in the sky would have diarrhea. Jun Dashao was also a normal person, so he didn't think of it. So he was at a disadvantage. The smell was so stinky that it made people want to vomit. So, what about Dashao, who had become a poop? There was another time when he was eating with the soldiers in a circle. He was eating happily when he had eaten more than half of the rice. But a cockroach crawled out from the bottom of the bowl. It was actually alive. If the above examples had only happened once, it would have been strange and outrageous. But it could still be explained as coincidence. But if it happened a second time, a third time, or even a fourth time, it couldn't be explained as coincidence anymore. Moreover, it wasn't over yet. The poop definitely had to take a bath. It was not easy to clean up, but when it came to the shore, he found that the clean clothes he had prepared were gone. He searched for it for a long time with his butt naked. Then he was hit by mud from nowhere. He had to go back to the river to take another bath. The timing of these strange accidents was extremely ingenious. They almost didn't give the people involved a chance to react. Even with Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao's superhuman reflexes, they could only dodge a small part of it. Most of the time, they were still at the mercy of others. Young Master Jun was truly speechless. It was a flat road, and it was fine for thousands of soldiers to walk over it. But when he walked over it, he and his horse fell into the pit with a loud bang. Even if this was a prank, this was too much. What kind of strength did one have to be able to create such a trap in such a short time? When he slept at night, it was fine if he didn't sleep in a tent. But as long as he slept in a tent, Dashao, who was used to sleeping in a level 1 sleep, would definitely find a few colorful snakes wrapped in his clothes when he woke up in the morning. To be honest, if it wasn't for the protection of the Hongjun Pagoda and the Yin-Yang escape, Dashao's days would really be hard to pass. However, Jun Moxie's countermeasures and reactions were seen by the people who set up the trap. They were also impressed. If an ordinary person encountered this kind of thing, they would have already had a mental breakdown. But Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao were still so lively. His face didn't even change. He went to wash when he was dirty. After washing, He didn't even look for clothes. He just disappeared with his butt naked. Moreover, no one knew how he disappeared. They scratched their heads and stared at him in bewilderment. Every morning, he didn't eat rice, nor did he eat the big pot of vegetables. Instead, he just roasted snake meat. Moreover, he ate it with relish. Even the group of soldiers also ate their fill. It would be a pity to waste such a fat snake. Qian Sun's serpent queen saw this. She gritted her teeth. If there were crows and other birds flying overhead, Jun Moxie would shoot them down from afar. Then, he would ignore those that were not tasty. Naturally, if there were delicious ones, he would have a meal of wild game. If there were any traps on the road, he would still fall into them. But only the horse would go down, not the man. In short, during the fight, Jun Dashao seemed to be at a disadvantage. But he could often fill his stomach with food. So, they continued to walk like this. The person who set up the trap was also ruthless. How can a person's psychological quality be so good? How can his guard be so strong? He must be tired to death, right? But Jun Moxie's previous life was spent in the worst environment. There were even more dangerous experiences than what he was going through now. Not to mention, what he was going through now was just a prank. It was definitely not life-threatening. Naturally, it was not comparable to the near-death experience in his previous life. Even after every fight, Dashao could actually feel a sense of familiarity that he hadn't felt for a long time. It was really relaxing and happy. This made the white-clothed girl, Mei Xuan, and the Qian Sun serpent queen look at each other helplessly. They really couldn't believe that there was such a freak in the world. If they were played like this by someone else, they would have found a tree and killed themselves. Chapter 436. Jun Moxie had finally settled most of the Shao family's matters, and the anger that had been accumulating in his heart for a long time had also been vented. However, the demonic charm on his body had unknowingly thickened as he continued to slaughter. Right now, every movement of his had a kind of demonic charm to it. Coupled with his calm eyes, it seemed extremely contradictory. But this kind of contradiction had instead added an indescribable demonic charm to him. That was the unique charm of the previous evil monarch, looking askance at the world, looking disdainfully at all living beings. White is also an eye. Green is also an eye. Dugu Xiaoi looked at Jun Moxie's eyes, becoming more and more blurred, especially in the recent period after the battle with the Shao family. Jun Moxie rarely went to the women's territory, often disappearing without a shadow. Although Guan Qinghan was still able to keep her composure, Dugu Xiaoi really couldn't bear it, often running around looking for Dashao. Of course, her efforts didn't have the slightest effect, because during this period of time, Jun Moxie really came and went like a ghost, rarely staying outside. Most of the time he stayed in the Hongjun Pagoda, wholeheartedly cultivating, improving his own cultivation. Fist is the hard truth, especially in this world. Of the 9 swords that had been refined previously, Jun Moxie originally wanted to use one of them to replace the sword in Jun Wui's hand, but Jun Wui refused. He insisted on using the sword that had been used in the decisive battle. Speaking of which, to the current Jun Wui, the weight of that sword was very suitable. And the most important reason was that Jun Wui used this sword to defeat Shao Han. This sword washed away Jun Wui's lifelong shame. Even if it was just a piece of scrap iron, Jun Wui still treated it as a treasure. Not to mention that the sword was originally a divine weapon refined by Jun Moxie through the power of gold. Although the quality was still not as good as the 9 swords refined by Jun Moxie, in the eyes of the mortal world, it was absolutely a rare divine weapon in the world. This feeling, Jun Moxie completely understood, so he didn't force it. In addition to paying attention to the quality of the sword, swords must also pay attention to the coordination. Only the most suitable sword can reach the ultimate realm of man and sword. Not only Jun Wui, but Dashao himself was also the same. During this period, besides cultivating, he held the divine sword Yellow Flame Blood to nourish the sword. A man has a soul, and a sword has a spirit. Only by having a deep level of communication with one's own sword can one become more and more proficient. Jun Moxie didn't know anything about the spirit of the sword or the soul of the sword, but he firmly believed that a divine sword that had killed countless people, a divine weapon that could cut through iron like mud, must have its own spirit. Perhaps it was just the psychological feeling of a swordsman. But if a swordsman didn't have feelings for his own sword, then even if it was made of ordinary iron, he wouldn't be worthy to own it. He used the power of gold to refine the yellow flame blood over and over again, and used his own mind to feel, to understand. The sword, only the sword, is the only companion that will never betray me. People will change, people will betray, but the sword will not, never. It will only accompany its master forever, until the sword breaks and the person dies. In fact, the closer he got to Tianxiang City, the more strange Jun Moxie felt, as if the sword was actually trembling slightly because of excitement. This was a kind of cruelty that faintly smelled blood, the excitement of thirsting for slaughter. This kind of faint killing intent caused the murderous aura on Jun Moxie's body to move and become more and more concentrated. So much so that Da Xiao's face became more and more silent. His eyes became more and more demonic, and his heart beat more and more intensely. The carriage went around a small hill. Jun Wui and Jun Moxie simultaneously gazed at this hill. Coincidentally, it was that small hill. That night, Jun Moxie had slaughtered the Bloodsword Hall in this very place. The looting crossbow. Only now did they realize that the slaughter that night was not unjust. The Bloodsword Hall was the Jun family's archenemy. They deserved to die. The road ahead was exceptionally spacious, and the lofty walls of Tianxiang City could be faintly seen. Jun Imo Xie squinted his eyes, and two sharp rays of light flashed in his eyes. It was as if a slumbering god of death had suddenly opened his eyes and opened his malevolent mouth. The murderous aura on his body rose with a rumbling sound, and his aura surged like a raging tide. The god of death opens his eyes, the king of hell stares, and the evil monarch looks. The journey was long, but we've finally arrived. I want to see how many people in Tianxiang City dare to speak carelessly. The divine sword blood of yellow flame was guided by Jun Moxie's aura, and without any prior warning, it bounced out of its scabbard by half a foot. The sword's light was as clear as water and glistened under the illumination of the sun. It was very eye-catching. It was as if the resplendent clouds had suddenly descended upon the world. It was as if the ruler of the universe had suddenly opened his eyes, and his murderous aura could be felt. In the face of the coming turbulence, he looked down on the common people and looked down upon the world. He was ready to slaughter without mercy and madly sweep. At this moment, the murderous aura pierced through Tianxiang City. All the soldiers around Jun Moxie suddenly felt an abnormally huge and terrifying aura suddenly attacking them. By the time they realized what was happening, they had unknowingly left Jun Moxie's side, and the surrounding 10 feet around them had become an empty space. Even these soldiers and iron-blooded men, at this moment, found it difficult to resist the sharp, murderous aura of the evil monarch. At this moment, the unfathomable Mei Shuyan also opened her eyes in astonishment. She looked at the man and the sword and frowned slightly. Others might not think too much about it, but in the eyes of a peerless expert like her, she could clearly feel that the man and the sword in front of her had their own imposing manner, and each had their own prestige. One man and one sword had unexpectedly become her two great enemies, and could pose a considerable threat to her. How could this be? At best, that is only a sword. No matter how special the material is, or how sharp it is still an inanimate object. Why is it giving me such a strange feeling? In fact, that sword is even more dangerous than Jun Moxie's. 30 miles away from Tianxiang City, the army had set up camp. This was the usual practice. When the general who led the troops outside returned to the capital, the army must not enter the city at the same time. Only after receiving the order, the general who led the troops would enter the city first, and then the army would return to their original encampment. Jun Moxie rode forward and arrived at the front of the army. With a cha sound, The metal flagpole on the carriage next to him suddenly issued a strange sound, and the big flag fluttered down. Then, with a whoosh sound, the flagpole seemed to have grown by more than half out of thin air. It was as if a sharp sword had pierced the sky. This kind of strange and unusual thing naturally made everyone who saw it dumbfounded. But under the oppressive aura of June Moxie's body, no one dared to ask why. At this moment, June Moxie was like a volcano that had been silent for thousands of years and was about to erupt. Suddenly, a horn sounded from the Tianxiang city's side, and the drawbridge was slowly lowered. Then, a group of people galloped out on their horses and welcomed them with thunderous hooves. At the same time, two huge banners suddenly hung down from the top of the Tianxiang city walls, one on the left and one on the right. The one on the left read, "Divine Blood-Robed Might." The one on the right read, "Triumphant Return from Tianan City." Following behind that group of people, another orderly team slowly came out. This was the official ceremony to welcome the return of the hero. The first group of people who had rushed out were getting closer and closer, and the sound of their hooves was like thunder. Their speed didn't slow down, and instead seemed to be getting faster and faster. Great General Jun Wui couldn't help but laugh as he saw this. It's been a long time, Dugawudi. Jun Wui's trip to the Southern Heaven region this time was a suicidal one. Now that he had returned safe and sound and was able to see his old friend again, he was very happy. With a satisfied smile on his face, he was about to welcome them when he suddenly realized that something was wrong. He couldn't help but be startled and reined in his horse. The newcomer was none other than General Dugawudi of the Dugu family, with his two sons and two nephews. As he galloped on his horse, he got closer and closer. General Dugu's hedgehog-like beard grew even more curly, and his eyes were as round as copper bells, as if they were about to spit fire. Before he arrived, and before his horse had even stopped, he let out a thunderous roar. "Dugu Chung, Dugu Shang, Dugu Qian, you three little bastards, hurry up and get out here." A thunderous roar resounded. "Also, Dugu Xiaoi, you bastard girl, get your ass out here as well. Arg, you're infuriating me to death." It was clear that General Dugu was very angry. In fact, he was unable to restrain his anger. The 7 brothers of the Dugu family had followed Jun Wui on his expedition to the south, Dugu Chung, Dugu Shang, and Dugu Qian. Dugu Wudi's loud roar had nearly scared the souls out of these 3 men's bodies. The 3 brothers' wishful thinking had been very good. After all, they had entered the city and handed over the order. Then, they would immediately rush out of the city and rush to the western frontier. They would seek refuge with their father and their uncle. In any case, they wouldn't be able to return home. They would certainly be skinned alive if they returned home. However, they hadn't expected that Dugawudi would come here to capture them. This was too urgent. The 3 men looked at each other in dismay. They trembled as they saw the fear in each other's eyes. After dilly-dallying for a long time, seeing that he really couldn't avoid it, he walked out dejectedly. He was like a defeated soldier who had lost a battle, and his entire body was filled with a kind of miserable feeling that he was at the mercy of others. "I'll kill you 3 bastards." Dugawudi glared at them. He panted heavily as he raised his horsewhip. "I told you to look after your younger sister. Where is she? Huh? The 3 of you are like bears, and you want to go to the battlefield? Damn it. You can't even eat hot shit. You still have the nerve to live? Why don't you go and die? How could our Dugu family produce such good-for-nothings like you?" Without further ado, the whip cracked. The 3 burly men did not move at all. They even secretly winked at each other and made faces at each other. "We knew that we would be whipped for sure if we came out, but we had the foresight to come out in armor. Anyway, you can't greet us with your face, can you? Hee hee. Where's Dugu Xiaoi? Why hasn't that bastard girl come out yet? You can hide for a while, but can you hide for the rest of your life? Quickly come out." Dugawudi threw away the 2 pieces of his horsewhip. Then, he shouted at the top of his lungs like a black bear. The Imperial City's guards of honor had also arrived at this time. In fact, they were almost in front of Dugawudi. "Father, your daughter missed you so much. Dugu Xiaoyi slowly walked out of the formation. She walked step by step in a very slow manner. You, Great General Dugu looked at her. Then he felt his vision darken, and he fell from his horse. Chapter 437. Today's outbreak is the 14th time this month. The first update has been delivered. Intense drops require a recommendation ticket. Duguwudi opened his eyes and was dumbstruck. His fingers trembled. You. He stammered for a long time, but couldn't say even half a word. Then he suddenly fell from his horse with a plop sound and fell sprawling on his back. He was in an extremely sorry state, but he still straightened his neck and stared at his daughter with eyes full of disbelief. On the other side, Jun Emosia was also shocked when he saw this. His eyeballs suddenly bulged out. What's going on? What's going on? The eyes of Dugu Cheng, Dugu Shang, and Dugu Qian had nearly popped out of their sockets. They saw Dugu Xiaoyi holding her belly with her hands and walking slowly and cautiously. Her figure was abnormally bloated, and she looked like a pregnant woman who was about to give birth. She was walking with great difficulty. One wouldn't even be able to see the tips of one's toes if one were to look down from above. This girl was so slender yesterday that a gust of wind could blow her away. So, how come her belly is so big today? This speed is too outrageous. Even a pregnant woman who is about to give birth after 10 months of pregnancy may not have such a big belly, let alone the fact that we didn't do it. Even if we did and hit the ground like an arrow, it still wouldn't be this fast, right? This little girl is too valiant. Jun Moxie didn't know whether to laugh or cry for a moment. This little girl has finally used this trick. Jun Moxie found it funny, but he also felt somewhat moved. This little girl is undoubtedly making trouble, but it shows that she is wholeheartedly in love with me. She loves me so much that she doesn't care about anything else. She doesn't care about anything. I like Jun Moxie, and I want to marry Jun Moxie. Just this method of doing things was very similar to the eldest young master's character. The eldest young master was a person who did things his own way. He never cared about what other people thought or said about him. On the other hand, the little lass disregarded everything else for the sake of the person she loved the most. Even though the two of them weren't exactly the same, there were similarities. One could imagine what the little girl was going to endure if she had to come out in front of the Tianxiang city's army. As a descendant of a great family and the only girl in the third generation of the Dugu family, how important was her reputation? The little girl was not stupid, and it was not that she had not thought of the consequences, but she still resolutely did it. Although it was a little ridiculous, but it showed that he was determined to bear the attack of the rumors and public opinion of Tianxiang. This ridiculous action was tantamount to saying to Jun Moxie, "No matter what you suffer, I will be with you. You will not be lonely. You will definitely not be lonely, because you still have me." The corners of Jun Moxie's cold and callous lips suddenly turned gentle. His heartstrings had been tugged at by this silly and naive little girl, Dugu Xiaoyi. Such deep love for such a little girl. What else can you do to her? Shout, you. I'm a sinner. What the F***CK is this? Dugu Wudi banged his head on the ground with a bang-bang sound. He was a dignified, great general of a country, but tears were flowing down his face. He called out to the heavens, but there was no response. "Father, don't be like this." Dugu Xiaoyi suddenly became anxious. She had forgotten that she was pregnant and started to run towards her father. The little girl's cultivation wasn't bad, so she would naturally be able to cover these 2 steps in the blink of an eye. "Stop! You don't move. Oh my, you silly girl, you're courting death." Dugu Wudi turned pale with fright. He jumped up and didn't care about his grief. He spread out his hands and nervously said, Don't mess with the baby." Ah, Dugu Xiaoyi suddenly realized that this was a special period for her. So, she couldn't run and jump around recklessly. She stopped running and carefully held her belly with both hands for fear that she might fall. She leaned back and swayed like a penguin as she walked over. Then, she said in a sweet voice, "Father, don't be angry. This daughter is unfilial. But I'm going to be a mother, and you're going to be a grandfather. You should be happy. You shouldn't be angry. I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I should be happy. I should be happy, huff. Dugu panted heavily. He was so angry that his eyes had turned blue. He anxiously hammered his chest and suppressed the anger that was on the verge of erupting. Then he pointed his finger at his daughter's belly. His voice was somewhat fierce, but there was also a trace of excitement in it. Whose? Great General Dugu was the father of several children. Moreover, he was used to seeing pregnant women. So, he shouldn't have been so ignorant. The little girl had only been away from home for a few months. So, it was impossible for her to have such a big body. However, the great general had been preoccupied with the idea that his daughter had been taken by someone else. What whose? Dugu Xiaoyi was stunned. Her big eyes opened wide as she asked. Dugu Wudi almost vomited blood. He trembled as he looked at Dugu Xiaoyi. Then he roared, I'm asking who's the baby inside. Inside where? Oh, this. Dugu Xiaoyi shyly lowered her head and said in a low voice, Who else could it be apart from elder brother Mo Xie? Huff, huff, huff. Dugu Wudi gasped for breath. He had been prepared for this, but he still felt as if his precious daughter had suddenly appeared in front of him with such a big belly. So he suddenly clenched his teeth and roared towards the sky, Jun Mo Xie, I will castrate you. Jun Mo Xie shivered in the middle of the team. What? Castrate me? For what reason? Your daughter drugged me and made me hover between life and death. But you still want to castrate me? Is there any justice in this world? Father, what are you saying? Dugu Xiaoyi stamped her little feet. Her face was red as she covered her ears with her hands. The little girl didn't know much about the matters between men and women, but she was very clear about the meaning of castration. So, she was naturally very dissatisfied. Don't stamp your feet. Don't stamp your feet. Dugu Wudi anxiously jumped up and scratched his head. Oh my little lady, you have two bodies now. So, you can't make big movements. Be careful. The imperial envoy finally rushed over with the imperial edict in his hand. He waved his horsetail whisk at Jun Wui. The imperial edict has arrived. Commander Jun Wui, receive the imperial edict. Receive your grandmother's mouth. Dugu Wudi flew into a rage. However, he had nowhere to vent his anger. So, he suddenly heard the eunuch's strange tone. Great General Dugu couldn't clearly hear what the eunuch was shouting. So, he suddenly erupted like a volcano. He stepped forward and kicked the eunuch who was rolling on the ground. Fu *K your grandmother's thighs. Can't you see that I'm busy? You're shouting at the top of your lungs with yellow smoke coming out of your mouth. Shout! You're shouting your mother's hair. The old eunuch rolled out while muttering gibberish and directly somersaulted 12 times in a row. Only then did he fall to the ground like a dried, salted fish and immediately fell unconscious. The imperial edict in his hand had already slipped out, and it had coincidentally fallen into a puddle of water with a plop. That puddle of water didn't care whether it was an imperial edict or not, and the words on it suddenly became blurred and turned into a black halo. Everyone's eyeballs started to jump around. No one had ever seen anyone dare to beat an imperial envoy in such a manner since ancient times. Moreover, this imperial envoy had come to announce the reward. Moreover, Great General Dugu's curses had been extremely fluent. In fact, everyone had to twist their brains several times to understand what he was cursing at, and this imperial envoy was out of luck. He clearly understood that the reward for Jun Wui wasn't light. He had thought that Commander Jun Wui would reward him with a large sum of money. He had dreamt of getting rich, but he hadn't expected that he would be kicked in the face, and he had ended up unconscious. In fact, he didn't even know which deity he had offended. Jun Wui looked at the imperial envoy. He tidied up his clothes and was about to step forward to receive the imperial edict, but he saw the imperial envoy roll away in front of his eyes like a rubber ball. So he swallowed back the words your subject, Jun Wui, receives the imperial edict. He stared blankly at Dugu Wudi for a long time. Then he sighed and said, Brother Dugu, you've caused a big disaster this time. I've caused a big disaster? Jun Wui. He. You're not a good person either. Dugawudi didn't pay attention to what Junwui had said. He glared angrily and shouted, "You've allowed your nephew to commit murder. You've committed a heinous crime. You and I can't exist under the same sky. Where's that little bastard Junmoxie? Quickly get out here. I'll punch him to death if he doesn't come out on his own." The sound of a horse's hooves was heard. Jundashao came out from the crowd. His lips were red, his teeth were white, his facial features were delicate, and his face was handsome. His demeanor was elegant, and his style was dazzling. He looked like a jade tree in the wind and a golden boy. "Junmoxie, you little bastard." Oh, Dugawudi pounced on him with bloodshot eyes. It seemed as if he wanted to eat someone. Junmoxie rushed up the flagpole with a whooshing sound. He had just doubled the height of the flagpole. He reached the top of the flagpole in a few swishes. Then he shouted, "What are you doing? This matter has nothing to do with me from the beginning to the end. You must investigate this thoroughly before you speak. You must find a good target if you want to act crazy." The flagpole was too high. Great General Dugawudi's martial arts were pretty good, but he couldn't jump that high. His sturdy body wasn't very agile if he tried to climb it, so he could only jump randomly under the flagpole. He became even more furious when he heard Junmoxie's words. His anger soared like a bull. "What? It has nothing to do with you? Whose business is it? Fu asterisk K. Let me get this straight. My daughter is already in this state, and you want to eat clean and not admit it? What am I supposed to get?" You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.